It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
Welcome into One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I'm Andrew Gullota alongside Michael Leegan. Kayla Wentzel will also join us a little later with our headlines. We're going to be with you guys from 11 to 2 a.m. on 90.7 FM, Facebook Live, and then also YouTube. And Michael, it's great to be with you tonight as we ring in Easter Sunday. So happy Easter to everyone. Happy Passover to everyone that celebrates as well. And also it's a happy time for sports fans as it's such a busy time here as there's just so much going on. I mean, opening day has passed for the Yankees. We got opening day on Monday for the Mets because of the COVID stuff with the Nationals. So we'll definitely get into all of that and really a preview of baseball. And I'm just so happy about that. And then, the NFL draft process. Now we're entering April. So it's draft time. So that's also a really fun time in the off season for the NFL. And then the NBA always keeps rolling. So it should definitely be a really fun show.
Yeah, I think we got a lot to get into today. A happy early Easter to everyone. And looking forward to it. Should be a great show. I would caution us, though, at least for me and Andrew, I know you're a Mets fan too, to say it's a happy opening day, opening weekend, because I don't know about you, but I was not in a good mood Thursday, Friday, hearing about the COVID stuff. But we'll get more into that later. But overall, great to have baseball back, great to be in the thick of the NBA season and super pumped for the draft. I know you are too. I'm sure the Saints probably got some needs they're looking at. I know for my Jets, it's all about the quarterback. So we'll definitely get into that later.
Yeah, for sure. That's one thing I think the Saints won't pick as a quarterback, but we'll get into that, what the Jets will do. And that's always the most interesting thing when you talk about the draft, who's going to go first, who's going to go second. Obviously this draft, Lawrence, we know is going first, but it's really after that. I think that's really the most interesting. And I mean, that's definitely something that we're going to get into later. But first, we're going to start off here, just jumping into our rundown with the Mets, Yankees, that season preview. Both of these teams should be, to me, pretty solid, really competitive. Obviously, the Mets kind of this offseason was just crazy. Steve Cohen taking over the team, all this Lindor stuff that we'll get into later as well, where they obviously trade for him, then just sign him. I think both these teams, and then obviously the Yankees as well, they're a team that should be right in the thick of it. As they try to win that coveted World Series trophy. I mean, to me, I really feel like both of these teams should be really good, and it should be an exciting season for really the whole, New York tri-state area.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you look at the Mets, I definitely think, look, they haven't been to the playoffs since 2016, and they got close in 19, obviously, and then last year, there were some decent expectations coming in and they didn't really fulfill them. So especially with the expanded playoffs. So with the Mets, I think this is a crucial year. I mean, if they can't make the playoffs this year, then I think, Luis Rojas, honestly, with the new regime and everything, could be, out the door. So I think it's a big year for him. It's a big year for Conforto, contract year. This is just, it's a pivotal, it's a maker. I wouldn't say make or break because we have a new ownership group, but Steve Cohen did say that he wants to win a world. If he doesn't win a World Series in the next 5 years, it's disappointment. And, if you're not making the playoffs out of the gate with a roster like they have, I know there's some weaknesses and, we'll get into that later. I think, it would be a disappointment if they don't make the playoffs this year. High expectations, I hope they can. I think they will. But it's going to be an interesting year for the Yankees. I mean, we can break down more of this later, obviously, with the opening day game. And obviously, they're going to be playing today as well. Or by the time we'll be seeing this, they will already have played. But, with opening day for the Yankees, it was more of the same. And, like you said, I think the Yankees are going to be good this year. We're going to get into World Series predictions later. I actually have them getting to the World Series. I'm not going to say if I have them winning yet. We'll tease that for later. But, two problems the Yankees had last year. Number one, clutch hitting. And number two, Garrett Cole giving up home runs. And those two things, bit the Yankees on Thursday. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out the season. It's only one game. You don't want to overreact, but Like you said, Mets Yankees, I think this is going to be a very interesting year, and it should be a fun year for both teams. It's been a rough year for, I think, not only people in the tri-state, but people across the country and across the world. So to have baseball back, to see fans in the stands, I mean, that was great. Yankee fans are a wild, rowdy bunch, but just to have them back was great, and to hear some noise. So it should be a great season.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, seeing fans actually move, I think, is something that's interesting.
Yeah.
Seeing those
No cardboard cutouts.
Yeah, no cardboard cutouts. But yeah, I mean, both these teams, I think you said it best. I mean, the Yankees, we'll get into this, but I think the Yankees, I mean, for them, I think they kind of brought the band back together. I don't know how much they improved, and we'll see what happens there. I think the AL got worse, which is good for them. Like, if they stay steady and the AL gets worse, that's going to help them out a ton. So again, both these teams should be good. It should be really exciting. Obviously, as you said, the Mets, I think it's interesting when looking at it. I'm obviously hoping for them to be really good as a Mets fan. And it's just nice to have a new ownership group, feel like they're making moves, and like I have confidence in what they're able to do. So that just, for me, there's not as much, nerves with this team. I'm just like, we'll see what happens on the field. I think they should be good. And if not, I really think Steve Cohen's going to make the right moves to help them, bring them to hopefully that World Series window eventually. And then after we get into our baseball preview with the Mets and Yankees, Mike, you and our producer Alex Wohl spoke to 1969 World Series champion Ron Swoboda. As I'm definitely, for me, I was a Mets fan, like those, like the two teams that won the World Series, 69, 86. I was really wishing I could do that interview, but you guys talked to him. I bet it was definitely really fun.
Yeah, it was first of all, Ron was such a great guy, super generous with his time, and just gave some great insights into the team, into the 60s era of baseball. It's a great interview. I can't wait for people to hear it. Just a little tease and something that you guys can look forward to. I really enjoyed, first off, obviously, we lost Tom Seaver, the Mets community and, the Mets team organization this past summer. And obviously Ron played with Tom, for a number of years. So to hear Ron talk about Seaver, what he meant to the organization, the kind of guy that he was. He even shared a little bit of a story that, kind of gives an insight into Seaver that I think maybe a lot of fans don't appreciate. We think of him as this amazing pitcher, one of the greatest to ever play the game, but a little bit into the insight of the guy that he was and how he acted with his teammates. And also he gave some thoughts on the status of MLB today, which I think is important. You always love to hear the older generation or the previous generation talk about how the way the game's changed. I don't want to give away Ron's answer. I think he definitely had some interesting thoughts with that. All I'll say is I totally agree with him. And just to kind of sum up what he said, and you'll hear it in the interview, we need to remember that, we got to put the love of the game ahead of everything else. So, we look at today's game with all these changes, 7-inning double headers, man on second base, instant replay review, all those things. I mean, some of that stuff's obviously to do with COVID, not the replay, but, a lot of these rules and a lot of the desire to speed up the game, to me, we're getting a little bit away from what makes baseball so great. And I understand they want to grow the viewer base. They want to get more people involved, and they want to make more money, which you can obviously understand from a business point of view, but and Ron said it, and you hear from him, and I totally agree with him. We just need to, continue to have that love for the game and remember what makes baseball so great. And we need to, highlight the players. And, just if you don't like baseball today, I don't think some of these rule changes are going to get you in later. So I was really interested to hear that from Ron. Some more great insights on the 60s and the 69 team. So really looking forward to hearing that interview later. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, especially like as a Mets fan, like the two World Series champions, I think because we've only had two winners, like those teams are just, really special. Even as someone who obviously didn't see both championships, you hear about it, and both those teams were obviously really good for different reasons, I'd say. Obviously, the 69 team being more of a surprise and the 86 being more of that just dominant team. But I bet he had some great insights on that. And then we're going to get into our headlines with Kayla, as, they're obviously a Met-centric headline. You have Lindor finally signing that 10-year contract, $341 million, as I'm just so happy he'll be with the Mets for the next 10 years. The Mets got their franchise guy. I'm so happy about that. We'll get into the Mets COVID with the Nationals as well. And then also the MLB moving the All-Star game out of Atlanta due to the Georgia laws with the voter restrictions. So we'll get into all of that with Kayla. And then, we come back and we'll talk about the NFL draft, which to me is a really fun time of year, especially to talk about these quarterbacks. I think especially this year, you have a really strong quarterback class, and that's going to be important for the Jets, who are obviously maybe looking for a quarterback. I think they are. I think we could kind of say that.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident saying we're looking for a quarterback.
Yeah. And, obviously it seems like Lawrence, he'll be gone, but Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Mac Jones, obviously Trey Lance as well. this should be a very interesting conversation. I think this battle between Wilson and Fields will be very, very interesting. It seems like the Jets are leaning towards Wilson with that number 2 pick, but I think both these guys, they have their own unique set of skills. And it's just, for me, I'm almost torn between the two. I think it'll be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's pros and cons to both guys. I mean, first off, at the top, I think it's kind of interesting you mentioned this is a strong quarterback class. Going into obviously college football was different this year with COVID, everything. I mean, Trey Lance played like one game this year.
Yeah.
So, going in, it was always Trevor Lawrence and company. I mean, you didn't hear really a lot about the other guys, and Justin Fields was always like this second place prize that, as a Jet fan, we're tanking for Trevor. And then when we find out we're not going to get him, it's like, oh, Justin Fields, like he's fine, but now, and the key is we can't get too overhyped by these pro days. They are what they are. They're wearing shorts and a t-shirt, throwing to some guys that some of them probably won't even be drafted, may not make it to the league. There's not any real pass rush. It's not a game scenario. So we got to take it with a grain of salt. That being said, as we've kind of gone closer to the draft, a lot of these other QB prospects are getting hyped up. I mean, good for their colleges and their PR departments that they're kind of hyping these guys up some more. But it's going to be very interesting to see what the Jets do at 2. It'll be interesting to see what San Francisco does at 3. With the Jets, I want Zach Wilson. I know that I was on the Deshaun Watson train for a while, and obviously for a variety of different reasons, some of them obviously very serious. I'm kind of gotten off of that decision train, but I really want Zach Wilson. I'm very committed to him. But look, Justin Fields has a ton of upside too, but some people like to bring up the competition level. Some people like to say that Zach Wilson has a higher ceiling. I mean, you've heard him compared to Pat Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers at times, which I mean, let's hold back on that a little bit. I mean, obviously that'd be great, but Trey Lance has been talking with him. I think I saw a comparison the other day, saying he's like Steve McNair. There's been talking to him being like Lamar Jackson. So that's all over the map. Mac Jones. He's got the dad bod like Eli and Tom Brady, but maybe he could win some games. I don't know. But it's just fascinating to break down these quarterbacks. Definitely a lot of thoughts, and can't wait to get into that later.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, talk about the comps are always really funny. I mean, the Wilson, I think just the big arm. I mean, the big arm, and also he throws like he has those sidearm throws as well.
Different arm angles, yeah.
Yeah, which is similar, obviously, to Mahomes and Rodgers. But I mean, that's a tough bill to live up to if they're obviously comparing him to him. And then we'll come back with our headlines with Kayla, talk about some college basketball coaching stuff, which is really interesting. Roy Williams retires after 33 seasons of coaching, and he had 18 seasons at North Carolina, UNC, and winning 3 national champions, 9 Final Fours. I mean, he was just an all-time legendary coach. And then now some kind of local news with Fordham. They hire Kyle Neptune, as I think this is a very interesting hire as they kind of try to right the ship with Fordham. And then kind of from there, we're going to jump into the NBA with the association, as right now you have the Nets and Knicks. Both of these teams are in the playoff hunt, which is really interesting. Different spots. The Nets are obviously looking for a championship. Knicks are kind of looking to continue their rebuild, but this is definitely, I think, a really fun season, I think, for both of these teams. And just to hear the banter between Nets fans, Knicks fans, it's really fun. And this Nets team, they're just so good. So, I mean, we'll see what they can do.
Yeah, I mean, the Nets this year, it's championship or bust at this point. I mean, it was kind of championship or bust going in, but you didn't know about Katie's injury and, Kyrie. But, once Harden got here, and then you throw in the likes of Blake Griffin and, LaMarcus Aldridge, who obviously aren't what they were, let's call it like it is. But, this team, I mean, you've seen the memes. You've seen, they're going to add Thanos next. They got all the Infinity Stones. I mean, this team is out of control. This is probably one of the – I mean – I remember back in the day, obviously you remember too, when Brooklyn had, Joe Johnson and Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce, and they were over the hill, but people were getting hyped about that. So obviously this, I mean, this is just insane. It's championship or bust for them. I think with the Lakers being kind of hurt, it'll be interesting. With the Knicks, look, the Knicks have been an amazing surprise. And I think, coaching is kind of overrated in the NBA. I mean, LeBron shows that every year when he has some guy that's no one ever heard of, coaching him, but the Knicks and Thibodeau, I think, are the one exception. Tibbs is just he's shown that the right coach can get the most out of talent. And look, you just see that in Julius Randle. You see that in Quickly, I think, is because he's had a great rookie year. RJ Barrett has made a huge leap. And just to see the progression of the Knicks is just amazing. It's great for New York, because when the Knicks are good, the Knicks are the one team in this city. It's very divisive, Mets, Yankees, Jets, Giants. Obviously, look, the Nets are here, but let's be honest, the Nets, I like people who are Nets fans. They're fine. The team is fine. And I'm from New Jersey, so I have no hatred towards the Nets. But like the Nets fan base is very small. They don't control the city. The Knicks own the city. If you're a New Yorker, if you're from the tri-state area, more than likely you're a Knicks fan. So when the Knicks are good, this city, this area is rocking. So I think there's a good chance they make the playoffs. I mean, right now they're the 6th seed or the 5th seed. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, but it's been a great year for basketball, and it should continue to be great.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when the Knicks are good, you see like Manhattan itself is so energized. And I mean, you're right. I mean, the Knicks are New York and New York City as much as the Nets. I mean, they're on a championship run, and no one really talks about them as much as this Knicks team. That's just an upstart team, which I find so interesting. And then we're going to finish up the show with all of our World Series for previews, MVP, all that stuff. Kayla will join us for that as well. As again, I feel like, when you look at these previews, predictions, it's always old takes exposed. That's all I could think about when I'm making these predictions, as, you never know. You already said that you're predicting the Yankees to go to the World Series, which, I mean, we'll see what happens. We'll get into all of our predictions. I'll save mine. So I don't want to tease anything to save it here for the end of the show, but should definitely be really, really fun. When we come back from this break, we're going to be talking all about baseball. As we said, Mets Yankees season preview definitely should be really fun. You are listening to One on One.
One on One has a brand new YouTube channel. Subscribe to WFUV Sports to catch our simulcast Saturday nights and get notifications so you never miss another show. Miss the show? You can find on-demand segments, interviews, and highlights every week. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Welcome back into One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM. I'm Andrew Gullota alongside Michael Leegan. And Mike, we're just going to get into our Mets-Yankees season previews. Opening day is upon us. Yankees, they've had opening day, and we'll jump into that. The Mets, they haven't had their opening day yet. Their whole series was canceled with the Nats. But I do want to start off with the Mets because we're both Mets fans, and they've obviously, I think they're the most active team this offseason. They made the most moves, and they were the last team to make the move with the Francisco Lindor extension. I'm just so excited for this team because now we're into the Steve Cohen era, and it just, to me, it feels completely different. This team should be very, very competitive. I like the depth that they added. They added the big star as well. And now it's time for them to show it. And they got to now show their improvement. I do think this team should be vying for the NL East, should be in the hunt for a wild card spot as well. And honestly, I'm just really excited for this team. I'm excited to hopefully be back at Citi Field soon, and should definitely be fun.
Yeah, I mean, first off, like you said, the first priority for me this summer is I got to get back to Citi Field, and I cannot wait to do that. Just to be sitting in the stands, having some Shake Shack, watching the game. If the Mets blow it late like they always do, that is what it is. But it'll be great to be back. As far as the team, though, and first off, I remember way back, when was this? It was September, August, when Cohen, that the deal was finally confirmed. Yeah, so I just remember ever since then, I have been in a perpetual state of hypeness. That's what I'll call it. I have been so hyped for this team and so incredibly excited. My energy level, I cannot remember a time in my life when I've been this energized about being a Mets fan. Now, I don't want to spend all this talking about Cohen, but, I remember when I was a kid, I'm like, 10, 11, and I'm walking into the stadium one time, and I see this cardboard sign on the ground. It says like, "Hey, Wilpons, trade this." And it's like when they were talking about trading Jose Reyes and all this. And like from my youngest days, the Mets ownership has hung like a sad cloud over this team. So now for Steve Cohen to be here, I'm just incredibly excited. But to get into the specifics of the team, first thing off the bat, Michael Conforto. I mean, we could talk about Lindor, and I think he's a key, and I'm so hyped about the deal. And I know we'll get into that with Kayla later, but I think this is a huge, important year for Conforto. He's often, look, you find this you see this in DeGrom all the time too. Guys with the kind of more subtle personalities, not as flashy, not as big, they don't draw a lot of attention, even though their skills warrant that kind of attention. And Conforto, for the last couple of years, I think has been kind of slept on. I mean, last year, I get it was a shortened season, but the guy batted over 300. I mean, he was on pace for about 30 home runs with a full season. He obviously injured towards the end, which I think hampered him a little bit, but this is a contract year. He's going to want to prove himself. I would love for the Mets to try to get a deal done, before the season ends, because, I don't want to lose him. But obviously with Scott Boras being his agent, you never know. But I think the Mets offense this year, I think kind of starts and ends with Conforto personally.
He's a player that he was very, very good before. And I think he kind of came into that, I don't want to say national light, but he hit 300, was still hitting the home runs. Because before he was a 30 home run guy, but hit lower for average, like in that 260, 270 range. And then last year he hit 300. And, he's a guy, I agree with you, because if he's rocking and rolling, and then you get Alonso, Lindor, I love this Mets offense. I got to say, I think they're going to be top 4, top 3 in the whole National League. I really do think that. You look at just the depth that they have with the star power, especially if Conforto is hitting 300 and that stuff, because you have Lindor, Conforto, hopefully Alonso can get it back going. I know he had a nice spring. Dom Smith as well. Then you have McNeil, like your average guys. You have Nimmo, who's your on-base guy. I think with the bats, this Mets offense should be really good. And if just they don't hit like 200 with runners in scoring position, I think it may have been even less than that. Yeah, like if they could just hit like a normal team, an average team in runners in scoring position, they should score a ton of runs. And that's something that I'm probably most excited for. Usually it's the pitching with the Mets, but this year I really do think the offense should be one of the best in the National League. I think I could say confidently top 4, but I'm even thinking top 3, top 2. I really like what they're doing on offense, and even more than the pitching.
Yeah, look, my whole life, your whole life, the Mets have not been known to be an offensive powerhouse. You think about even when they went to the World Series. Who were you scared of in that lineup? Daniel Murphy, who was on a hot streak, Lucas Duda. Nobody, Michael Kadire, who was 100 years old at that point. Like, even when the Mets have been good, the last, which has been very few, the last few, 10 years or so, the offense is not what carried them. So this lineup, honestly, is probably the deepest lineup I've ever seen. You go to right off the top, Nimmo is going to probably be your everyday leadoff hitter. Then you're going to go probably Lindor in the 2-hole, Conforto in the 3. You're going to have Alonso cleaning up probably. Then I would assume after that, Dom Smith. I think Dom, I know he's not a left fielder by trade, but I think he can play a competent left field. I think it'll be okay. And then after Dom, you're going to have Jeff McNeil, who honestly is probably one of your best hitters, and probably in the 6th hole, which is insane. This is a guy, just a couple of years ago who was in the top 3 third of the lineup because, he's one of their best hitters. Now they're so deep, they can bat him further down in the order. And, then you're going to have JD Davis, who, it's interesting with Davis, and I don't know how you feel. I honestly, and this is going to be a bit of a hot take, maybe it could be a cold prediction, honestly, but I'm going to put this out there. I think that Luis Guillorme, my man with the Fu Manchu mustache, which I hope he brings back because that was elite, he will be the everyday third baseman by the end of the season. And, we can get into that a little bit here, but I don't know if you think that's a bold take on my part.
I don't think it's bold. He was so good. The one thing I like about Luis Guillorme, he can the glove is great. And I think everyone talks about the glove, but last year his bat turned on and he was just a singles hitter and runners in scoring position. He was like the best hitter on the team with that. And that's something that I care a lot about. The home runs are great. And but the Mets, they got their home run hitters. They need guys that can get the runner in from third, do the little things. He does that really well. Davis is he's always like that Cinderella story. And you're like, when is he going to turn into the pumpkin? You almost think eventually he's going to run, like, because he was like the best trade for Brody, and like he's kind of that era of the Mets, and it's just it'll be interesting to see what he can do. I mean, I do agree with you. I actually think Guillorme, probably injuries too, I think could be an option. Like he's going to probably play a lot, especially because that depth with the Lindor trade, a lot of that depth went away. So now that kind of thrust Guillorme into it. But I mean, he's a guy that, and then also the defense, the mustache. Then you had him making the play in spring training a few years ago when he caught the bat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just like this. You know, I like also the depth that the Mets have too. You have Jonathan VR coming off the bench. You know, you have a lot. To me, this offense is going to be good. The defense will be, I think, a little worrisome, but when you're hitting that good, I don't think it's as much as a worry. I mean, Dom Smith, it could get, you know, it could be a little rough out there at times, but I agree with you. I think he can play, especially if he's, you know, hitting in 290, 300, like you're going to obviously take his defense, but that's kind of the only area where you are rough. But even up the middle, I mean, you know, Lindor's a great shortstop. I mean, I think he'll be fine there. I mean, Nimmo in center could also be a little rough too, but I think this offense is so good that it kind of offsets the defense. And then the pitching, again, I feel like moving over to starting pitching, I think that's kind of, you obviously have DeGrom. He's going to be the best pitcher in baseball, Cy Young candidate. We all know that. Best pitcher in New York. I have to say it.
He is.
Yeah, he is. I mean, I hear Yankee fans saying it's cold. No, please stop. No. It's DeGrom. And so they'll have DeGrom. They'll have Stroman right now as your number 2, who I like. He looked good in spring training. He had like a new pitch, which I think was pretty interesting, as he's going to be, to me, a pretty solid guy. Your 3 is either going to be, you know, Peterson or Walker. And then your 5th right now is Lucchesi. I think they have the depth there. And then also you're going to have Carrasco and Syndergaard coming back. So I think if no one else gets hurt, and definitely, you know, you got to, that's a big asterisk because you don't know. But I do think if these 5 guys are out there and then you get your reinforcements later, I think this starting pitching will be okay. And even if one more guy gets hurt, you have Yamamoto as well in AAA. So it seems like they built enough depth, but again, that could be a little worrisome, especially if more starters go out.
Yeah, well, as you obviously, I'm sure you remember when Brody made the idiotic comment last year that we have the deepest rotation in baseball, and then we were terrible. So, you know, with all those injuries came down. So this year, I think they do have better depth, which I think is a good thing. You know, obviously DeGrom, look, we don't really have to worry about him. We're going to get into Cy Young predictions later. You know, I'm sure maybe one of us will have him winning the Cy Young. You know, Stroman, it's funny, literally every spring training game that was on television, he pitched. Like I felt like the only guy, he was like the only pitcher on the staff. That's how many times I watched him pitch. But he had a good spring. You know, Taijuan Walker, I didn't see a whole lot of him. Obviously, you know, he had a very good year last year for first the Mariners, and then he was over with the Blue Jays. You know, but Walker's the kind of signing that, you know, a few years ago the Mets wouldn't have made. He's like that solid kind of back end guy who you're gonna have to pay a little bit more for, but he's gonna be that solid pitcher. In the last few years, the Mets, you know, they've been bringing the likes of like, you know, just some guys, Corey Oswald or Rick Porcello, somebody who's like washed up, who was good like 5 years ago, who maybe they can be good. You know, I just like the way that this team's being built together. Now, obviously, the injuries off the bat with this rotation are concerned because, you know, Carlos Carrasco, you know, with the hamstring, you know, still rehabbing. And then, you know, you have, you know, Syndergaard is going to be out for at least a couple more months. But hopefully they can make it to that point. I think Carrasco's, honestly, this delay kind of helped him a little bit. I think he's like a little ahead of schedule, I think, according to Luis Rojas. So I think the hope would be, because I'm not as concerned about the rotation as I am the bullpen for the Mets. I think the bullpen, and we talk about like the defense on the field and all that, I think the bullpen is by far the biggest concern for the Mets, especially with Seth Lugo being out. So the hope would be that, you know, you can make it through these first few months, and then by the time Syndergaard comes back, you can move Peterson to the bullpen. I like Peterson, but this rotation is going to have enough depth where you can put him in there. You can put Lucchesi in there maybe once Carrasco and Syndergaard are back. And, you know, but the bullpen is, like I said, my biggest concern because Diaz, look, he had a good year last year, but it was a 60-game season. So who knows how much that really is. I mean, he had a 1.75 ERA, which is great considering what he did, but it's a little suspect. And then, you know, Trevor May, I think, is a solid guy. You know, Aaron Loop, I think, was okay. You know, but like Jacob Barnes, they're going to be relying on him. Apparently, he's going to be an opener. The guy has like a 4.50 career ERA. He had a 5.50 ERA last year. How much can you really expect from a guy like that? Familia, I don't know why he's on this team. Please get him out of my life. I don't want to see this guy. And you know, Betances,
it's so true, though.
Betances, I'm sorry. Familia was like a head case like 5 years ago when he was good. He's a head case now and he's not any good anymore. Like, can we please get rid of the guy? It's another Brody signing, of course. And then, you know, at least Sandy was smart enough to get rid of him. And then Brody brought him back. But whatever, we're not going to get into that. But Gesellman, like Gesellman, one good year, 2016. The guy has been here for 5 years. He's been terrible every year. Why is he still here? He gets hurt all the time, and now he's insulting Hank Aaron by changing number 44. Like, can we please get this guy off the roster? So I'm sorry that I'm ranting about this bullpen, but I'm very concerned about them. But the hope would be that they can at least make it a few months and then get some reinforcements.
To me, the bullpen like last year wasn't bad because Lugo was so good, and like I think
he's not here. That's the
him not being there is really it's worrisome just because we know that Diaz, he can go through some stretches where it's just not good. And like last year, I think since he changed his walk-up song or his pitch-up song to like the trumpets playing and
the Narcos theme, or whatever that is. Yeah.
And I mean, I think first of all, it's a great pitching song. And to me, it always gets me pumped up. And ever since then, he said like it pumps him up better. And like he's been like lights out. So hopefully, I think he could be their lights out closer. And what they brought him here to be is a lights out closer. So I'm hoping that he could, be there. And then I like May. I think he could be a good 8th inning guy. And then really beyond that, I'm a little worried. I mean, you have Castro, who you didn't mention. They brought him in there last year, who was on the Orioles and was just
he's
not
like
good.
Diaz Jr. Like he's so
like
up and down.
He's like Diaz light. He's like the light version, not as dirty as him, but it just gives up a ton of home runs as well. And as you said, Familia. I mean, he definitely, the blood pressure goes way up when he comes in. He's probably years off my life watching Familia pitch over the last 5 years. Because I mean, even when he was good, he was still loading the bases with no outs and then getting out of it. But I mean, between this Mets, this relief pitching, if they're going to go down, I think they're going to go down here, which is, I mean, that's the worst in my opinion, because like you get there to the 8th, 9th inning and then you blow it. Those are the worst losses. But I mean, we'll have to see what happens. I mean, I think if they can get to Lugo, I think if they're still above water, when Syndergaard, Lugo, Carrasco comes back, I think they'll be in really good shape. It's just, can we get to that point? And I think that's going to be the biggest thing when looking at this whole Mets really pitching staff between starting and relievers. But now I do want to move over to the Yankees, the team that, made the playoffs last year, ALDS, the year before ALCS. They've been into the playoffs, knocking at the door of the World Series for really a while. And it's really go time for them, in my opinion. This is, to me, the year, or I see Aaron Boone getting fired. I mean, if they don't win it this year or get close, I mean, I'm like, because he's not a good manager, not a good England manager.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, and like he's made his mistakes in the playoffs and stuff like that, and Yankee fans get on him for that. And to me, I think Cashman is one of the best GMs in baseball, so I don't think they let him go. So I think Boone is, he's the firing guy. He's the odd man out here. And just when looking at this team, like the offense is going to be really good. I think we all know that, especially in the regular season. They're going to hit 1 billion home runs. Judge is going to hit his. Stanton's going to hit his. LeMahieu's going to probably hit 330 and be in the batting title race. To me, that's not the worry. It's more the postseason. And as you said, can they get the timely hits? And, when you're looking at the pitching, I think beyond Cole, this depth is suspect. I really do believe that. I think Cole, he's very good. I don't think he's as good as DeGrom, but I think he's really good. And then beyond them, I don't trust Kluber and Tyone and those guys. I just don't. And I'm putting the Yankees on a high standard because they are a World Series contender. But especially in the playoffs, that does worry me a lot.
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, to go back to your point about Aaron Boone, I said that myself to somebody a few days ago. Look, no disrespect to Aaron Boone. I didn't play past freshman baseball in high school, so I'm not saying I would be this elite manager. But when you have that roster, I think it's likely that most people can manage to 100 wins. I'm sorry, his decision making is a little suspect. It's just he uses 4 bullpen arms in the opener, and he's complaining about by the time he gets to extra innings he doesn't have enough guys. Well, like, manage your bullpen better, buddy. I don't know what to tell you. Like, you brought that on yourself. So he's made some suspect management decisions. And look, he's been here, since 2018. It was his first year. Yeah. So, it's been a few years now. And, it's kind of interesting to think about what the Yankees would be like if George Steinbrenner was still running the team versus Hal, because I think George would have fired everyone by now, even Cashman. I mean, for the Yankees to only have 1 World Series in 21 years. And, for, that 1 World Series to be, 12 years ago now, it's a little, suspect. And I'm surprised, if George is still around, I don't know if Boone would even still be here right now. That's how kind of, brash and, intense he was. But besides the point, it's a big year for Boone. I think if you don't make it to the World Series, you kind of have to seriously consider moving on from him. And Cashman, I agree, is probably the best GM in baseball. But, it's all about results. And at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, the Yankees are good, but, it's interesting. The Yankees are that one team in sports where it's not good enough to just make the playoffs or to be a consistent winner. And the Yankees are a team where you had to be winning title on title on title. And for the Yankees not to be doing that, I don't know if the fans' expectations have changed. I don't know if we're just living in a modern era with free agency and everything, so you kind of have to lower expectations. But from an outsider perspective, when you think of the Yankees, you think of winning titles. So the standards are always different for them. But to go off also your point about the pitching staff, I'm also very suspect about this pitching staff and what they can accomplish. I think they're going to benefit from having more of a weak American League. I think the National League is the better league this year. But, in the division, it's a little – the Blue Jays got some good studs with the bats. I mean, Vlad Guerrero Jr., they got George Springer now. And outside of Cole, like you said, who even he had some issues last year, Corey Kluber, honestly, that's a Mets signing right there. Signing a guy who's old, washed up, who won a Cy Young. It's a Wilpon signing. Yeah, it's just kind of ironic. Outside of him, I mean, Domingo Germán, who, in my opinion, probably shouldn't be allowed to be playing in baseball because of what he did off the field. But that's my opinion.
And he's a head case anyways.
The simple fact is he's there. So you have to say that he's there, which he is. Who's been 2 years off the field. I mean, who knows how he's going to be. David Garcia. I mean, this is a guy they've been hyping for years. He's not even in the rotation. He's in AAA. So, I'm a little suspect about the pitching.
Yeah, and that's really the one area where, I mean, when you get into the playoffs, it matters so much to get innings from your starters, because then your bullpen gets taxed, and then, you hear the Yankee fans, everyone's taxed or who's hurt. And that's why I feel like if George was there, they would probably have added a big starter. I mean, maybe they would have traded for one, maybe it would have been Bauer, whoever it would have been. I feel like they would have got a big guy to go with Cole. And I feel like this team they brought the band back together, but they didn't add. And I just feel like, what are they expecting? Their offense is home run reliant. We all know that in the playoffs, it's tough to win like that. You have some games where you score 10 and there's some games you score 0. And like that in the playoffs, it's hard to win 7-game series, 5-game series. And we've seen it over, the last 3 years. And, yes, they brought back LeMahieu, which they needed to. But besides him, they still have just the big sluggers. And then you're going to see in the playoffs, Judge get up with bases loaded, 2 outs, needing a big hit. And he's going to strike out because he's trying to hit the grand slam. And that's just kind of what, to me, the Yankees are right now. It's definitely going to be interesting because, will they break down the door? Will maybe Judge then he's going to maybe now change his approach a little bit once it goes to the playoffs? I think that's what the Yankees are hoping, that he does hit better in the playoffs. They can get the big hits and they could finally break through. I mean, we're kind of, back in 2019 when the Nationals won, a lot of people thought they couldn't break the door down open, and they did. So, I mean, we'll have to see. But to me, this Yankees team, it has a great offense, but to me in the playoffs, it's just that's an area of concern. And that starting pitching depth is definitely somewhere where you could see one guy get hurt or 2 guys gets hurt, and it's just, it could be a real dumpster fire there. And that's something for me. Yes, maybe I'm looking negative for the Yankees because obviously I'm not the biggest fan of the team, but I do think that this team, if they're looking to win a World Series, they have a lot of flaws that the Dodgers don't, I think. I mean, teams like the Padres don't, and that's going to hurt them, whether it's in maybe the American League and that playoffs or the World Series. It's going to hurt them for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting season. So, I think, look, both teams are positioned to have a great year. The question is, can they fill up those promises?
Yeah, for sure. And then we'll predict all of that later when we talk about our World Series predictions. Definitely should be really fun. But I think that will wrap up here our season preview for the Mets and Yankees. Next, Mike and our producer, Alex Wolves, will sit down with 1969 World Series champion Ron Swoboda. But first, we are going to take a quick break. You are listening to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show.
Be sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
One-on-one, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. I am Michael Leegan, joined alongside by Alex Woles, and right now we'd like to welcome in a New York Mets legend who was a member of the 1969 World Champion team. He is also the author of Here's the Catch, a memoir of the Miracle Mets and more, Mr. Ron Swoboda. Ron, thanks so much for joining us today.
Great to be here. You guys good?
And we're doing great. So, Ron, right off the top, a little bit about me. I'm a diehard Mets fan. So, of course, my whole life I've heard nothing but, amazing stories about you, my grandfather, my father, etc. Of course, so many Mets fans know you for your amazing catch in Game 4 of the 1969 World Series. So I'm sure you get asked this all the time, but I'd be kicking myself if I didn't talk about it. So could you just kind of walk us through that a little bit? What's it like to be remembered for maybe not only one of the greatest catches in Mets history, but World Series history? And, there you were in the outfield. You got Brooks Robinson at the plate, men on first and third, game's kind of on the line. If you kind of walk us through what was going through your mind at the time.
Yeah, I have to feel pretty privileged,
Yeah.
You play 9 years in the big leagues, you make a few mistakes along the way, and to be remembered for the best play you ever made in the only World Series you were ever in was a pretty fortunate thing, and we were up 2-1 on the Orioles, and Game 4 was right down to the stretch, top of the ninth inning. We had a 1-run lead. They had 2 runners aboard when Brooks Robinson hit a line drive off to my right, and I just took off, and somebody said, "What was on your mind?" I wasn't thinking of anything but chase that thing, and I thought 95% of the way there, I was going to be a day late and $1 short. So I laid out to my backhand, and when that thing hit me in the web, I knew I had it. So I knew the worst thing was the game was tied and we were still alive. And that's the fulcrum of that World Series. We're up 2-1 if the Orioles win that game. And if they score the go-ahead run, there's a good chance they would have. We're tied at 2. Instead, we go on to win the game and go up 3-1 with Game 5 at Shea Stadium. We were in the driver's seat.
And everyone talks about that catch, Ron, but I also think there's a lot about that team in general, where you talk about really pulling off the upset against a terrific Orioles team and winning that World Series. What do you think it was beyond just that catch, beyond that moment, about that team that season that really made the World Series possible for you?
Really interesting, because if you go back and look at the National League playoff against the Braves, whom we beat 3 straight, they knocked our pitching around pretty good. And it was our left-handed platoon and their offense. They out-hit the Braves with Henry Aaron, Rico Carty, Orlando Cepeda. That was a pretty solid middle of the lineup there that could do some damage. And they did in that World Series. And our guys out-hit them. Against the Orioles in the American League, our pitching started to exert itself, and it looked like we could play with these guys. And we lost Game 1 to the Orioles in Memorial Stadium, where I grew up in Baltimore. And I remember Gil Hodges, our manager, who just never missed a point. He said to us after the game, "Guys, just remember, you don't have to be anything but what got you here." In other words, don't try to get bigger than life. You won 100 ball games in the regular season. Just be that team. You don't have to be better than that team. And it kind of settled us down a little bit. And we went out there thinking, we can play with these people. And we did.
Yeah, well, you guys certainly did. The Miracle Mets are probably one of the greatest upsets in sports history and one of the greatest runs in history. Ron, you just mentioned the pitching was the key in that World Series. And of course, we sadly lost Tom Seaver this past summer. And I know you guys were teammates for years. You guys were friends. I was just wondering, is there a story you can share maybe, or something about Tom that maybe the casual fan doesn't know that kind of tells us the type of man that he was?
Well, I'll tell you what, Seaver pitched Game 1, and the very first hitter, Don Buford, hit a fly ball in Memorial Stadium that I didn't catch. that I should have caught against the right field fence. Just did everything wrong you do on a fly ball, nervous as heck. And I let that get over my head, and we lose game one. And I feel like I owe Seaver something, but he never said a word about it. You know, it was all go out there and give me what you got, and that'll be good enough. But I'll tell you what, Tom Seaver that season in 1969 had a perfect game going against the Cubs late in the season. Shea Stadium is 4 deep. I mean, every standing room only is 4 deep. The stadium is jammed. Seaver's in the 9th inning, warms up, and before he throws a pitch, he just stops. And you see him rubbing the ball, and he's looking around. He's checking out Shea Stadium. Because in his mind, he said, I got a perfect game going here, and I'm going to deliver. And he just took in the scene in a way that, you know, us lesser mortals would have never even thought of. You know, had the presence of mind. And of course, Randy Hundley, the first hitter, tries to bunt for a base hit their catcher, you know, and it's like, you don't bunt. And Seaver throws him out easy, and it's like, who's going to run for you after you bunt? And then up comes Jimmy Qualls, a guy that's hit 2 balls pretty hard off of Seaver. And I think very early in that at-bat, he lines one out there, and it's a base hit, clearing away, and the whole thing is like anticlimactic. He's not going to lose the shutout. We're not going to lose the game. But Tom Seaver lost something that I think was really important to him. And he said to someone who wrote about it, I've never been more disappointed in anything in my life, on or off the baseball field, than when I lost that perfect game in 1969. He wanted it bad, and we wanted it for him, you know, and it is still a mystery to me why he never had a no-hitter at least. You know, forget perfect game.
Well,
why he never had a no-hitter with the Mets. He didn't get one until he went to Cincinnati, I believe.
Yeah, that's definitely, you know, with Tom Seaver, obviously one of the sad things, they never got no-hitter with the Mets.
With Tom, you know, he had that. They still have that vineyard in Calistoga, California. And we went out there a couple of years ago. Art Shamsky took us out there when he was writing his book. And he took me, Bud Harrelson, and Jerry Kuzman out there. If you would have seen how proud Tom was of the 3.5 acres of Cabernet that he grows there, and of the house that he built on property that was just, it was natural land. And he created this beautiful scene and was so proud of it. He went out there every day with his dogs tending the vines, and he learned how to clip them and tend them. And because there isn't anything babied or handled, you know, there's no agriculture more exacting than growing expensive Cabernet grapes. And you know, GTS wine is an incredible Cabernet. Okay. I think it's like $150 a bottle now, and worth every penny. A little out of my category for the most part. I don't buy a wine that expensive, but when you drink it, you know why.
Yeah, that's really awesome stories hearing about Tom. And you mentioned Gil Hodges as well, and you mentioned Tom Seaver. And I feel like the 60s team with the Mets in general had a really interesting pull on just the psyche of New York in a sense, because it was a time when the Mets were struggling in previous years, and that kind of changed with this team in 69. What type of impact do you think that year's Mets had on the city, really coming at us in difficult times, some civil unrest, a lot of challenges? And you mentioned how a figure like Tom and a team like that really changed a lot in New York.
Well, yeah, you know, that was, you know, politically was very fractious time. You know, the Vietnam War was just coming over its peak. A lot of anti-war activity, a lot of identity politics. You know, feminism, gay rights, all that stuff was starting to emerge politically. And yet we were not as polarized as people as we are now in any stretch of the imagination. And yet it was a really rough time. But the Mets were able to sort of paper that over with a feel-good story. You know, we stuck that in the middle of some pretty tough time. What was good about the times was the war was feeding the economy, and there were jobs. And that was interesting because people had jobs. You could come out of college. You didn't have to serve, time, you didn't have to do free work for companies, to get yourself situated as a junior or senior. Yeah. What do you call it?
Internships, yeah.
Internships, yeah.
You didn't have to do that with companies. You came out of college with a piece of paper and they were lined up there wanting to offer you good jobs. That's the difference. And so a lot of young people back then, this is the age of Aquarius, what do you mean, do I love you? I love everybody, right? Some young people were taking a year off and to find themselves, and join communes, and all this kind of stuff was going on back then because you could. So you had a better audience for anti-war protests, civil rights protests. You had the time on your hands, so you could, those things had a welcome audience, with the ability to show up somewhere. They weren't as worried about getting a good job because it was there for them. So it was different in that way. And so we were in those troubled times, just this feel-good story that just kind of bubbled up through all of this. And how neat that we were able to do that. Now, it was funny, in the game when I made the catch in Game 4, anti-war elements had published a story that Tom Seaver said, if the Mets can get in the World Series, the United States can get out of Vietnam. Well, they used Tom and his likeness, and it was completely without his permission. And he had to say to the media after that game, that became a story. It's like, I'll tell you when I'm ready to say something about the war, but you don't quote me without my permission. So he had to clear that situation up. And it was, in the middle of a World Series, a little reality,
Yeah. Ron, you mentioned off the top, I think Alex also kind of talked about it. Gil Hodges, was obviously vital to that team. And I'm sure you're well aware the past few years has been kind of a push from fans and, former players to try to get Gil into the Hall of Fame, because I think many of us agree it's an injustice. If let's just say, a Hall of Fame voter happens to be listening right now by some chance, what would you say to that person to try to push Gil over the hedge and, make sure that his case for the Hall of Fame is made? What makes him a Hall of Famer?
I just think you need to look at Gil Hodges coming out of World War II, which cost him time in the big leagues. Okay. He was a Marine, served on Okinawa. So he understood war, and that was a war time for America. But it cost him time on his career. And if you looked at what he was as a player, not the accumulation of all the stats, but what he meant in that clubhouse of the Dodgers back then. And then transitions to managing. And, of course, a heart attack, cost him time as a manager. But if you looked at the way he handled teams and what he meant to baseball, and you add up the two things as a player and a manager, I think it's an open and shut case. And we do have the Veterans Committee considering that. And I'll be completely disappointed and discouraged in the process if he does not get elected to the Hall of Fame this year.
We've talked about a lot of members of that 69 team. Gil Hodges included a great argument there, and Tom Seaver. I want to ask about you in particular for just a minute, because, a write-up surrounding your book described you as almost this epitome of an everyman on the field, somebody who can do everything, is there just to put the effort out and to make a difference on the team. What type of qualities do you think comes in that everyman type of player that you embodied during your time with that team and the role that you served?
Well, look at that roster in 1969. You tell me, who were the superstars? Cleon Jones, Tom Seaver, obviously, unanimous Hall of Famer. Jerry Koosman, I think, was a superstar for it. Cleon Jones was vying for a batting title in the National League, so he had reached that level of play. To me, everybody else was a guy. There's an expression in baseball, he's just a guy. Well, most of us were just guys out there, and we went out there every day, and I think most of us felt like if we didn't lay it all on the line every day, every shot we had, you couldn't compete at that level. I never felt like the big leagues were just there for me. I felt like I was scuffling. I felt like a guy running to catch the train with his suitcase, you know? Yeah. And I used that illustration in my book. And you look in the bar car and there's a bunch of, there's Henry Aaron and Tom Seaver and those guys. They're in there having a cocktail and I'm running like hell to try to catch a train. That's the way I felt big league baseball was to me. I had to hustle or I wasn't going to be there.
Yeah. Ron, we kind of talked about it a little bit, and you just mentioned, these stars that were on the 69 team, Cleon, Jerry Kuzman, Seaver. Having been there in the beginning when the team was losing and then seeing some of these guys come in, did you start to think and realize, maybe we can turn this around? Did you start to see the talent that was coming in and think maybe we have a chance now?
Yeah, there was a sense when Hodges showed up that the seriousness level here had changed. And then you looked at all those arms, okay, beyond Seaver and Kuzman, Gentry and Nolan Ryan. Nolan Ryan's the only World Series he ever played in a long and brilliant career. Tug McGraw, my best friend. Just there was a sense that we were getting better. And there was a sense in 69 as we came out of spring training, we're going to be better. Nobody knew what better meant. And if you go online on Baseball Reference and you look at all those play-by-play sheets that you can dredge up that are really interesting, if you love minutia, you look at the games and the lineups that Hodges ran out there early in that year, the first couple of months. My God, those lineups, they had guys everywhere, and Jim Gosger and Rod Gasper, and there were, Hodges was looking for something, and I wasn't doing much. I was stumbling and bumbling, and with a great opportunity, I couldn't produce, and so Hodges is casting around looking for something. While he's doing that, at the end of May into June, we reel off 11 straight wins, starting in Shea against the teams from California. We swept them in a 3-team series. We go to California and continue the winning streak through 11 games. We go from bubbling around 500 to contenders. We're in the hunt. That's when the team made the Don Clendenin trade for a power-hitting first baseman from Montreal. Montreal had been trying to trade him to Houston, and he wasn't going. So he was happy to come to the Mets, and he was exactly what we needed. A little more bop at the plate from the right side. Hodges had decided on a platoon lefty-righty, and he was going that way. And he is, to me, the missing piece, the element that we needed. And we kind of rolled from there. It still looked like the Cubs' year. Rolling into September, August, rolling end of August, early September was the first glitch in the Cubs program. They went into a slump. We're winning 3 out of 4, and we were 5-6 games behind them. We blow by them in expanse of 10 days, 2 weeks, and we're by them and never look back. And that was all because that team was so hot by then, and the Cubs flattened out, and they were gone.
You mentioned how you noticed there was a shift in 1969 with that Mets team. And I feel like just to fast forward now, we're talking here around MLB opening weekend. And I feel like there's a similar shift that you could see in the Mets team now, obviously, with new ownership, new players, Francisco Lindor gearing up, getting ready for the season. Do you see a similar atmosphere on today's Mets team to the one of 69? There's new kind of energy and what we can kind of expect this season?
If they're not excited by themselves at this point in time, if you're a New York Met right now and you're not excited by your opportunity and your chances with the additions, Francisco Lindor. God, I hope he finds a number he can extend the contract for. I think it's folly for him not to find a number and sign. Conforto needs to be re-upped. I think Pete Alonso had a spring training where he started to prove that his approach is less intense. Let the ball come to him. He can hurt you either way, left center, right center. I think he's done that. I think they got a batting order that works. McCann is going to be surprising, I think, and handle that pitching staff. I'd like to feel more confident about the bullpen, but you don't know till you see it work. Diaz had a very solid spring. Maybe he's settled in. Maybe he stopped, maybe he stopped trying to throw too hard, trying to throw the greatest slider you ever saw since mankind, moved out of the caves, and and just be what he is. What he is plenty good, and throw strikes with it, good strikes with it. I think they've got a chance here. They should be excited by that. DeGrom, good God, the guy was 102 in spring training. Who does that? That's ridiculous. I saw him pitch in West Palm against Scherzer of the Nats, and DeGrom was, as he usually is. He's the coolest number out there.
Yeah. Ron, we kind of going with this new energy. Obviously, a lot of it has to do with Steve Cohen, the new owner. I'm just curious, obviously it's only been a few months. What is your kind of appraisal of what he's done so far? Do you see that shift that the ownership has brought in terms of how the team is being run? And also on a side note, there's been talk of bringing back Old Timers Day. Will you be participating if we bring it back?
I don't know about taking the field because I can't run around like I used to, and I don't see as well. But I heard that, and I was like, yeah, that's nice, because that didn't seem like a very important situation for the previous ownership. Steve Cohen is treating the Mets like a major market team. Is that clear? I mean, isn't that clear? And it's not a gimme. It's not a free pass to postseason. But like I said, here's a guy that's got artwork, sitting around the house collecting dust that is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So hundreds of millions of dollars for elite class ball players isn't going to rattle Steve Cohen too much. But he also understands, he's going to be, he with a major market sensibility, he's going to try to get his money's worth. He's a pretty smart guy. I know, that business he's in is pretty competitive, and and he's seen all shades of it. From the trouble with Preet Bharara, who tried to put him in jail, to starting a new company and being pretty successful at it, and buying the New York Mets, something that he's loved all his life as a fan. But he's changed the environment, and players need to react to that, and this will be a different bunch. I think they'll go out there knowing what's expected of them, and they have the tools to deliver.
Last question for me, Ron, is, you look at this Mets team and this year in general, we're getting fans back in the stands. I think it's a really important part of this, and we're getting that return to some form of normalcy. And you mentioned earlier that, people aren't as divided as they are now. What type of impact do you think having fans back, having the baseball season back, can have here on as we head into April?
I was surprised as an old guy when COVID, the pandemic struck, and that something as unsubjective as a pandemic became a political issue. I was surprised at that. I was surprised at that. Probably shouldn't have been. But I think baseball is one of those things that can unite people. I think you care about a baseball team. It is, you care about your team, you follow them, you can watch all the games, on TV or on your computer. And you don't care what anybody's politics are. You care about how he's playing How's he representing himself in that uniform that you like, and you buy all the stuff and the hats? And I've got my Mets alumni shirt.
Very nice. Very
you know,
nice.
I wear my gear. I wear my little Mets jacket around New Orleans because I care. I think fans like that don't care about politics. They don't care about your politics. You care about, is that pitcher out there out of gas, and should Rojas be out there yanking them? You know, that kind of stuff. That's the questions that baseball brings. I would like baseball to work a little harder at instructing people, educating them in the nuance. I think baseball's move is to sort of bury nuance and try to make the game a home run hitting contest. I despise that. I think that's a bad idea. Baseball evolved more than a couple of years back to something that is so rich in undercurrent and nuance, and that's what you need to sell and inform people about. Make them better viewers of the game and more aware of what's going on out there. You know, the duck, you know, swimming like hell under the water. Baseball has all of that's going on, and people need sometimes to be made aware of it. That's on the play-by-play guys and the color guys. Okay, I think baseball should concentrate more on that than trying to make, you know, act like you people don't really like the game. You know, when you put a guy on second base in extra innings in the big leagues, you're trying to shorten the game. You're saying to me people don't like baseball enough to hang around and watch it. You know, people are going to be in and out of the game no matter what you do. People, they may not have 3 hours. They may want to go back and watch the replay. But the game is too rich in nuance and beauty, not to let that be the emphasis. These guys are great players. They're coached as good as anybody. The video backup, the weight workouts, they're better athletes overall. Let's just let that talent come to the fore, and stop trying to monkey with the game in ways that convinces me, you know, the commissioner, he might love being commissioner of baseball, but I'm not sure he loves baseball.
Yeah. Well, Ron, I couldn't have said it better myself. I definitely think that as a diehard baseball fan, I totally agree. And, you know, that's definitely something that we should all keep in mind going into this season, that, you know, we have to preserve the game and show a love for the game. But, you know, Ron, we appreciate you being here today. As a lifelong Met fan, it's been such an honor to talk to you and pick your brain. And, you know, thank you so much. You can get Ron's book, Here's the Catch, a memoir of the Miracle Mets and more, where books are sold. Ron, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on. This was a treat. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks, Ron. We'll be back with more of 101 right after the break.
Be sure to check out all of our latest podcasts on WFUVsports.org or wherever you get your shows, including NFL Friday, Nosebleeds, Pick and Pod, 5 on 3, College Gridiron, and FUV FC. Also, our newest edition, Off the Air, diving into the station's legacy with its most prominent alumni. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics. It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVsports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVsports.org.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to One on One. I'm Kayla Wentzel here with Andrew Gullota and Michael Leegan, bringing you our first headline segment. So, guys, as you've talked about a little bit earlier in the show, there's some super exciting news for Mets fans, which is Francisco Lindor, and he will be staying in Queens until 2031. He signed a 10-year, $341 million contract just the other day. And here it is again, just an example of Steve Cohen taking care of business for the Mets. He tweeted out afterwards, "You're welcome," after the deal was finished. So, Michael, let's start with you. I know that you're super excited about this. I know that you love this move. So, I don't know. How do you feel? Give it to me.
Yeah, so I definitely, obviously the Lindor had set a deadline with the Mets that he didn't want to negotiate past opening day. So as we got closer and closer to the deadline, I was definitely getting a little nervous because, we traded for this guy. We didn't give up. The Mets made a pretty good deal because they only gave up, some lower level prospects. They gave up Rosario. They gave up Jimenez, who I like, but it wasn't like they gave up, the top of the top like Brody would have done. So, and with a big free agent shortstop class coming up, if they didn't get a deal done with Lindor, it wouldn't have been the end of the world, but it would have been a really bad look, and I think it would have been bad for both sides. And I think, you saw it on Twitter when it was announced that the Mets had offered $325 and he turned it down. A lot of Mets fans were like, how can he do that? Like, that's ridiculous. He's being greedy. A lot of people, obviously with the pandemic, people losing their jobs, it's not exactly a great look. And, if Cohen didn't get it done, it would have looked bad for him that he misses out again at some other big name. If Lindor didn't get it done, I think it would have been a rough year for him in New York. He probably would have been booed if we're being completely honest at the home opener. So it was a lose-lose if it didn't get done for both sides. So I was worried about it, but then, it was Wednesday night comes around and, it's 11 o'clock or so and that deal finally comes through. I was elated. I was surprised. I was happy. It was a great evening, definitely some stressful days, but really great news. I'm very happy about it.
See, like I was never worried. Like Uncle Stevie, he's got this. Like he does, and that's what I'm calling him now. He said that he likes the nickname Uncle Stevie. I knew like when he bought the team, everyone was like, "Oh, we don't have to worry about it anymore. So let's just not worry about it. Like this is not the Will Ponds. We don't have to deal with that." And like Mike, as you said, it would have been a bad deal both sides. Like if this didn't get done. So like all the momentum was there. I mean, who knows who like leaked the offers? Because I bet someone leaked it just to try to get this deal closer so they can meet in like that happy medium, $340 million, which I mean, still it's so much money, but I mean, Lindor deserves it. To me, he's like the Mike Piazza now of this Mets era. And I know that's kind of tough to put on someone because obviously Piazza's a Hall of Famer, made it to a World Series with the Mets, franchise guy. But I mean, that's what Lindor now has to do. I mean, you give him this big contract, he has to come through. I think he will. I mean, especially now, like the pressure's at least off of him with the contracts, and now he can, go out there, play. And, he's just, I mean, he was great in the interviews, all these, press conferences. He was great from the beginning when they traded for him. And now, when he signed the deal as well. I mean, it just shows that Steve Cohen, he's for real. He's going to give out the money. And like at a certain point, you can't worry about it. Like, the Mets are on the right track, which is why I'm happy about this team. And like, maybe if this year it doesn't work out, I feel like Cohen and, Sandy Alderson will make the right moves to get it in the right direction eventually. I do think that this is the right group of guys and Lindor is going to lead that. And I mean, that's why I'm just so happy that the Mets, they have an owner that will spend a lot of money, act like a New York team. It's just, I'm just elated. Like, that's all I can say.
Yeah. It's really like putting your money where your mouth is or something like that. I mean, Steve Cohen's talked a big talk this whole time, but if he had just gotten Lindor for 1 year, it would have been all for nothing. I mean, kind of a wash. And this is the largest contract that the Mets have ever given. So I think that really makes a statement to all the other teams that now with Steve Cohen there, they don't care about money pinching anymore. They're going to go for whatever it is that they want. I think it's like the third largest contract in MLB history. I mean, it's really up there. It's a lot of money. And I know that Francisco Lindor, he said he like had screamed and he was so excited. He was like, it's like winning the $300 million Powerball. And I'm like, yes, but you were probably going to have that much money anyways. But anyways, so I think that this is super exciting for them. And I think that it does take off a lot of pressure for Lindor, because it shows that he doesn't have to like perform great for this year to enter free agency again and try to get new prospects. And so I think that for him, this will create sort of a better environment for him to thrive as a Met, because he's here for 10 years now. So it's not like he has to have one stellar season so this way people want him again. Like, we want him for 10 years. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, well, just to go off Andrew's point real quick, I was slightly confident it would get done, but as a Met fan, like, first you see we didn't get Springer, and then we didn't get Bauer, who honestly, thank God we didn't, because he's a psychopath. And then we didn't get Brad Hand. And it's just like we felt like we didn't really try to get Real Muto. So like, even though I knew this was a new era of Mets baseball and I knew Steve Cohen had the money, it's like I'm still waiting for that first mega deal to be like, okay, we have finally arrived. And I think, Andrew, your point that this is like the new Mike Piazza, I think it's very well spoken. I think that's a great point. The guy who comes over in a trade is going to be here for a long time. It's just very exciting. The Mets are lucky because they have a lot of young talent, and it's going to be interesting to see who kind of emerges as the face of the franchise, whether that's Lindor or hopefully Conforto stays around. I still view DeGrom as the face of the franchise, because I still think, obviously DeGrom's a pitcher, Lindor plays the field, but I think Lindor is great, but DeGrom is, one of the top 5 players in baseball. I mean, Lindor is maybe top 10, but I still view DeGrom as that guy, also because he's homegrown and all that. And also, interesting enough, with the Kayla you mentioned with the contract point, it's the largest they've given out. They've also never given out a contract more than $200 million. So let alone to give out a contract that's $341 million, I think is definitely kind of a, hey, Mets fans, we're here now. Also, I found it kind of interesting that it was for $341 and Fernando Tatis signed for $340. So they had to give him $1 more million. Lindor's probably like, hey, I've been doing this longer, maybe give me another $1 million, but I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was definitely, like, if that was where he wanted to go, like, I'd be fine with giving him $15 million, because $15 million over 10 years really isn't the biggest deal. I mean, it would be like, what, $1.5 million per year. So it's not, for me, it's not that big. I mean, obviously in baseball
for
terms,
you, that
$1 million is obviously a lot of money, but in the baseball, land of things, it's not as much. I'd be comfortable giving him that extra bit. And like, as you said, like, this is the biggest contract, ever by the Mets by far. I mean, I think DeGrom was like 140 or 150. Then Cespedes was like 120, 130. And I think Piazza was after that, maybe Beltran. But if you combine all like the top 3 contracts, it doesn't even amount to the $340 million. So that just shows you how big it is. Like, Lindor got the contract times 3, the biggest contract for the Mets. So, I mean, it's just, all you can say is like, let's get to playing baseball. And that's what this Mets team was, which I know, like, once the game got canceled, it's like everyone was on such a high. We're like, okay, let's go. We got DeGrom going against Scherzer. And then I know it all got canceled. But I mean, look, the season should be really fun. I mean, I can't wait to watch some Mets baseball under the Steve Cohen regime.
Yeah. And I mean, like you said, opening day did not go off for the Mets. So the Nationals have 4 players who have tested positive for COVID already. And I think they have maybe 6 more in quarantine for contact tracing. So neither team is going to play this weekend, and the Mets will have to wait until Monday to begin their season. And the Nationals will too on Monday. They'll be playing mostly kind of with a practice squad, really, of extra players to go against the Braves on Monday. So, Andrew, I think that this has just showed us that the COVID drama has already begun. The season hasn't even started yet, and there's already COVID cancellations. So how much do you really think that this sets back the Mets? I mean, like you said, they were coming in on such a high, and then they kind of halted, and nothing has happened now. And they're still kind of waiting for that moment where they can come through.
I think more obviously for the Nationals, it's going to hurt them, and because the Mets are obviously, they don't have the positive cases. It's just, I think it's more for the fans, because it was like such a, they were such a high Wednesday night. So going into Thursday would have been hopefully DeGrom would have pitched well, and it's kind of all that stuff. But I mean, for me, I'm not like that worried about it. I mean, at the end of the day, they're professionals. They get an extra few days off. Maybe that helps as well. I mean, but then down the line, you have to make up these 7, probably be double headers, 7 innings, like all that stuff that the MLB's put in place. That may be a little worried, but that's down the line. So I'm not going to worry about that now. And then, get to start the season on Monday, which, I mean, look, it's a little, for me, it's like, you would like to have it on Thursday, like the rest of the league, and have DeGrom pitch. And it would have been against Scherzer, which was just such a great matchup between those two guys. Really one of the, to talk about the best pitchers of this generation, you have the best 2 or one of the best 2s right there. And, that kind of stinks. But at the end of the day, I mean, start Monday, season gets underway. I cannot wait, but I mean, it's a little disappointing. I can't lie.
Yeah, I'm going to have to take things a step further and say, not only is first of all, this is very disappointing. And I'm just going to come out here and say that the Major League Baseball is screwing over my New York Mets. I am very upset about this decision for a few reasons. Number one, look, the Miami Marlins played about with, 2 different teams worth of players last year during COVID. They had about 1 billion positives. They, kept changing in and out of their roster. And I know they shut down a little bit in the beginning, but the Marlins proved that this whole alternate site taxi squad thing can work for you. So look, I understand. I just want to preface this by saying, COVID is obviously a very serious issue. These players are not all vaccinated, and I get this. We got to take this seriously, which I totally appreciate. But my thing is, that we have these taxi squads and alternate sites for a reason. And from what it seems to me, now who knows, maybe today or we're going to find out there's even more positives and this thing is really spreading. But from what we know, it's only 4 positive players and it's like 9 or 10 people in quarantine. So let's just go off the preface by saying that they have it contained to these 4 players. I don't see with these protocols in place, with these quarantine in place, why you can't just call up these 9 guys. I understand that, hey, it's not necessarily fair, whatever. But, and I know it's a different sport. The Denver Broncos were forced to play a football game with no quarterback. Like I said, with the Marlins, they had 30 different guys coming up. We got to adapt. And I don't think it's fair to the Mets, who've done nothing wrong. They've done everything the right way. They've been safe with COVID, to have them kind of screwed over in the fact that they can't play an opponent. And what makes this worse, in my opinion, is like Kayla mentioned, now you're going to have the Nationals going with this, mishmashed roster of guys who are AAA players and, guys who didn't make the team go play the Braves. So now the Braves are going to get 3 easy games, and the Mets, they're going to have to start off in Philly. And it seems like a double standard to me that I know it's a few days difference, but I don't like what's going on here. I don't think it's fair to the Mets. And I understand it's only 3 games and they'll make these up and whatever. But, 3 games in a division like the NL East, when you got, the Mets, the Braves, the Nationals, even the Phillies, this is going to be a very tight division. And those 3 games, and look, the Mets could very easily well win those 3 games or whatever, but it makes a difference. And, when you play those games very early on in the season when you're fresh versus when you're going to have to play a doubleheader in late July or something, it seems small, insignificant right now. But the thing is, it's going to add up over time. And I just don't feel the way that the league has operated in the past and are going to operate the rest of this week, that it was necessarily fair for the Mets to have these games canceled. And also selfishly, as a baseball fan and as a Mets fan, I wanted to see them play as soon as possible. So that was disappointing.
No, I think that those are really good points. Like, they are, while these 3 games, like, they do feel kind of insignificant, but like you said, it's fresh. And instead now you have to make them up later in the season where you're going to have already played so many, probably. It'll probably be some kind of double header type thing. And like, I think that is definitely going to affect your results of it. But I don't know. I feel like they were right to cancel it, even though it was disappointing and it was frustrating, but they were still kind of finding positive cases like on Thursday, weren't they? I thought that they were still kind of conducting a search. So I don't think that they could have sent out a mishmash roster or whatever, because they weren't really sure who had it and who didn't yet. And they were still waiting on test results. So I think that while it sucks, I think in terms of safety, it was probably better for them to cancel it. But yeah, you're right. Now they have to go play the Braves get to play a mismatched team, and the Mets have to go play a healthy Phillies team. So it definitely, I think, is going to negatively affect the Mets, like, in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's like, I think it's more in the MLB, like, because obviously they canceled them because they didn't know, like, who tested, like, the contact tracing, obviously, maybe still a little shoddy, which to me, it boggles my mind. You went through a whole season of this, and this is still an issue, which, I mean, just tells you, I guess, how the MLB operates, which, I mean, again, I feel like is something that, I mean, to me, it just doesn't make much sense, because you see, like, the NFL, like, even if there was a positive test, like, the night before or like 2 days before a game, they would be able to, basically get it all sorted out and play the game and no worries. I mean, the one game, I guess, would be the Broncos game, but really besides that, it was pretty good, even when you had those positives on Friday. I mean, they fielded out throughout the season, and it felt like the MLB was doing the same. And now, like, they just start again, like this, they can't contact trace in a day or something. And obviously it took them the whole weekend, because now they're not going to play the whole weekend. So they couldn't even play 2 on Saturday or, 1 on Sunday or whatever it ended up being. Just, it shows that whatever process is in place, it's not working. And this is now the second year. That's frustrating, and it's frustrating for the Mets. And, I just feel like also the MLB doesn't want that situation. I think it happened with the Marlins where they had like 3 or 4 guys on their roster. They just took them out and they still played the game. And then it spread even more through that game. And then like a lot of other guys had it. So maybe they're just trying to err on the side of caution as well, and not have a situation like that happen again. But it's been over, a year. This is now your second season, with this, in the COVID new world, and, still not having a full grasp on it is definitely a little disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest problem is, look, from a safety standpoint, of course, this was the right thing to do. If your main goal is to keep players safe, I 100% understand why you want to make this move. My biggest problem is that we have got the Major League Baseball was the first professional sports league in the United States to deal with COVID. They went through an entire season before NFL, NBA, NHL. I mean, obviously they all had their bubble situation and stuff, but they were really the first one to say, like, we're going to try to play a regular season cross country and see what happens. So if there was any league that should have been prepared for a situation like this, it was Major League Baseball. And, not to like bash them a little excessively here, but they were kind of bragging a little bit going into the season, like, oh, hey, look, we're having all these tests and no one's positive. Well, you know what? You just had to cancel your entire first series because now people have COVID. So don't come out and say, oh, great, you're doing it and have this happen. It's Major League Baseball is so poorly run in a variety of ways, but we don't have enough time to get into all of that. But the whole COVID thing, it's so poorly planned out. And I understand for the safety point of view, but the decision is not consistent with the standards and the protocols they have in place. They have these taxi squads and these, alternate sites for a reason. And I appreciate and totally agree that it was the safest thing to do. My thing was, it wasn't consistent with what the standards that MLB has laid out and what they've already done in the past. And again, I understand it's a completely different league, but the NFL, I remember specifically, you had situations where it was like a Saturday night and someone like on an NFL team would test positive for COVID and like they would still play the game the next day because they tested everyone and whatever. And I understand the probably wasn't the safest thing to do. But if you think about the fact that in NFL football, you have a 53-man roster, not like 25-man or 20-man, whatever roster, and you're also playing a contact sport. I mean, baseball, honestly speaking, aside from like golf, is probably like the lowest risk transmission sport because there's no physical contact aside from the catcher and the batter. You're not really standing that super close to each other. So, I understand the decision from a safety point of view. My biggest problem is that it wasn't consistent with what has already been done in the past. And with a league that had experienced COVID for, I understand it was 60 games, but for a full season already, for them to have to cancel an opening week series already it's not a good sign, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a bad omen for how the rest of the season is going to go. I mean, if they're not prepared right now, then how are they going to be prepared later? I mean, I guess they're just hoping that their teams get vaccinated as the summer goes on and then they don't have to deal with it as much anymore. But I don't know that they can really go with that. But yeah, I mean, the MLB also made another major move this year. Just this week, they pulled the All-Star game out of Atlanta in a response to Georgia's new voter restrictions. And so Robert Manfred said, Major League Baseball fundamentally supports voting rights for all Americans and opposes restrictions to the ballot box. So they haven't announced yet where they're going to have the new All-Star game. They just said that they were taking it out of Atlanta. So Michael, how do you feel about this?
Well, first off, I 100% agree with the decision. I think it was a great thing to do, and I think it was the right thing to do. Obviously, this is a sports show. We want to talk about sports. We want to have a good time, and we don't want to get like too political or whatever. But, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I think that, restricting people's voting rights is, it's just anti-American. It's against everything that we stand for as a democracy, as a country. And I don't care what, political beliefs you harbor. Any scenario where we're restricting people's access to voting is ridiculous and it's absurd. And, I totally agree with Major League Baseball's decision. And I think it's a great sign that they're saying, hey, we don't agree with this. We're going to throw some spotlight on this and we're going to move our game. And the hope is that I think if enough big companies, organizations do stuff like this, that Georgia will, kind of have to realize that, hey, we can't continue to operate like this because now we're not bringing any money for the state economy and we have to kind of reverse course, which is the hope and the goal. So I 100% agree with the decision. I think it was the right thing to do. I wouldn't, let's put it this way. If they hadn't done it, I wouldn't have been like, oh, Major League Baseball is awful for not moving the game. But I really respect them for putting, their money where their mouth is, sticking their neck out for basic human rights and basic democracy, and saying they don't agree with it. And also, we've seen even outside of sports, like obviously a lot of, Hollywood movies and TV shows are kind of produced within the Atlanta, Georgia area. I know they moved production out of there. So it's an encouraging sign. So overall, I agree with the decision. I think it was the right thing to do.
No, yeah, I mean, for sure. And just looking at the MLB with like Rob Manfred and his statement, I thought the biggest thing, just like reading it was a lot about listening to the players, which are like the player union, the player, all their different organizations. And that's something that is new for the MLB, which, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, they're, I would say, one of the lagging leagues when it looks like listening to their players. The NBA has done an amazing job with that. And I think that's why they've grew in popularity. And that's something for me to see with the MLB, will they continue to do it and like listening to their players? Because I think a lot of players were adamant that they wouldn't have played in the All-Star game if it was still in Atlanta. And that was something that for me, just seeing like the verbiage of Manfred's statement saying like listening to the players, listening, doing that, that's something completely new for the MLB, which is something that will be interesting to see going forward, especially with like the new CBA and that stuff. And will they continue to make moves like this? It's definitely interesting, I thought, because the MLB, when we look at the past, they're not the best at marketing their players, listening. They're usually behind on that. And this maybe sees them at the precipice of it, which to me was an interesting change.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of felt like, so I think it's the right move. So let me just say that first, that I think that this was the right move, and that all of these like major companies should be opposing these voter restrictions. But I also found it a little like promotional promotional activism, where people do something that seems like they're really activist, but I don't know, it feels like the underneath intentions, it kind of felt a little bit for show to me. And like we have said, like the MLB kind of has had a history of not really listening to their players and being fairly racist. So I would say that so I support this new movement and this new momentum shift towards listening to your players. But like last summer for the Black Lives Matter movement, I feel like the MLB didn't do that much. Like I remember the NBA being so on top of that and so instrumental in change for that. And I felt like the MLB was a little quiet perhaps. And I know that I'm sure they made statements and I'm sure that they did stuff like that. But I feel like kind of maybe it's like a bit of a makeup move because they haven't done a lot in the past. And so now they're like, oh, here was our opportunity to show that we do care and show that we do oppose voter restrictions, and that we do stand with our players. And so while I'm happy about this new movement and I'm glad that they're finally jumping on this bandwagon, it kind of gave me PR vibes a little bit. Like it was sort of a move that they were just hoping would, I don't know, like increase their brand and make them more like the NBA and more popular.
Yeah, I agree with that actually, Kayla. I think that's spot on. Well, it's interesting. Now we're kind of talking about philosophy and what is right and wrong action. But like the action itself is the right action. Now we're kind of going into motivations, and now we're going to have a full philosophical debate about utilitarianism and Kant, which no one wants to do. But I agree that MLB is like one of the leagues has a very suspect, well, not even suspect, it's proven track record of being backwards on race, being backwards on, just like equality and certain things. They're not exactly a progressive league and they're not a political league. And when you compare that to the NBA, I think the difference with the NBA is they show support for causes by letting the players, speak for themselves. They promote up the players. They let LeBron, they let Kyrie, they let, KD, they let the players, Jason Tatum, speak out and be the voice of the NBA and be at the front of the movement. So there's really like, it shows that it's a genuine decision. And I'm sure there's also financial motivation for them as well, but it seems more genuine and more real because you're putting the players first and allowing them to lead the charge. And it feels more grassroots. Whereas with Major League Baseball, like they said, they talk to the players, but it's like the owner's decision. And it's like a little artificial. You haven't seen like the players really come out and be the voice of it. It's just like a way in the presentation that makes it kind of feel different. And I remember, for example, last year with the Mets, like Dom Smith was like such a huge voice for the Mets. And like, he was very vocal about Black Lives Matter. And they also did that whole thing where it's like they walked off the field. Like, I don't remember who they were playing at the time. But the like that moment was great. That was like an NBA type moment, but the league didn't play it up enough. I don't really feel like Dom got some kind of voice. So I think there's just a big difference between like the way like the MLB kind of presented this versus other leagues where it seems more genuine.
No, yeah. And I think the players thing is the biggest thing. And I think that's with the CBA and like that new stuff. And there's going to be a big fight there. I think we all know it. considering they can't agree on anything. I think that's something that, the MLB should definitely, they can show that if they actually are genuine with giving players like more of a voice, I guess is a good way of saying it, would be through the CBA and, whatever that ends up being. And I'm not 100% sure like what would be in that agreement, but that's how you do it. So you could allow them. And then, I think that will be interesting to see if they could back it up, because I think now kind of you look at what can they do next? I think that's kind of will be very, very interesting. But I think that will wrap up our conversation on this busy MLB news docket here. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, nationally, and then obviously with the Mets. Next, me and Mike will be talking about the NFL, getting into some QB draft prospects. But first, we are going to take a quick break. You are listening to One on 90.7 FM.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Back here on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I'm Andrew Gullota alongside Michael Leegan, and now we're going to get into the NFL with now the draft process is really starting to become prominent. We're in April, which is always a fun time to look at pro days and stuff. Didn't have a combine this year, so that's definitely where everyone's eyes are on the pro days, and especially with the quarterbacks. Like, this is the biggest thing. I think everyone knows Trevor Lawrence is going number 1 to the Jaguars, but now it's kind of who's going to go after that. And obviously the Jets with the number 2 pick, that's the big question, as they're going to be looking for a quarterback and all these pro days. And I think the biggest one that got the most publicity was Zach Wilson, because he made like that 60-yard bomb off the back foot. Obviously no one was in his face, but it was a perfect throw. So I will give him a lot of credit for that, because it's not like I can do anything like close to that, or anybody could. Like, that's just shows his raw talent. I will say that, but it still is only a pro day. I definitely want to just point that out. But it seems like the Jets, like all of like the sources and the rumors are saying that the Jets want to take him. And I just think it's really interesting, because to me, I think he has all the intangibles to be this star QB. I mean, like we were talking before, like about how like his comps are like Rodgers and Mahomes. I don't know if he's going to be that good, but I think he has the intangibles to be a very, very good quarterback in this league. But I just think he needs some coaching. Like Mahomes, he sat behind Alex Smith for a full year. Like, I don't think, looking at Wilson, I don't think he'd do that with the Jets. And like the first year may be a little rough, and he may throw a lot of interceptions, and he may have to learn a lot. And to me, it's like, do the Jets have that coaching? Do you trust the coaching to develop him? That's kind of my thing with Wilson. And it's going to be interesting, because I love Wilson. I've been high on him for a while, but it's like he is raw, and like that's something that would worry me. But that potential is so much potential.
Yeah, I mean, look, as a Jet fan, let me just start off by saying I like Sam Darnold. I think Sam Darnold was a good. I wanted him when they drafted him. Well, I wanted Baker Mayfield, but we didn't get him. But Darnold was there. He was the guy I wanted at that pick. When he got here, I was excited. I thought he had a very good rookie year. I wanted him to succeed. And then look, his career here was ruined by the hiring of Adam Gase, and that just goes directly on ownership. That goes on Mike Maccagnan. He had a bad hand here, and I do legitimately think that if maybe he can go somewhere else, a la like a Ryan Tannehill, just like when he left Gase, that maybe he can succeed. But the simple fact is, at this point, I think it's best for both the Jets and Sam Darnold to split up and to go their separate ways. And I think both teams can be better off that way. So going into the draft, I do want Darnold. Obviously we've heard these reports, trading down, or maybe they'll take Sewell at 2, and then they'll have this great offensive line. And look, Joe Douglas is very good at hiding his hand, and he's very good at, not really giving away what he wants. And the same thing with Robert Saleh so far. So I think it's very possible, who knows, maybe it's a red herring. That being said, Douglas, Saleh and the offensive coordinator, Matt LaFleur, they all went to, not Matt LaFleur. Is it, which one?
Yeah, he's the OC.
It's
there.
Matt. I always get
Mike
mixed up with his
Mike
brother.
LaFleur.
Mike
LaFleur is the Jets.
Him
and the
Giants. Him and his brother. I always get them mixed up. The LaFleur brother, the one that's not been a head coach, does with the 49ers. Mike, he was there. So, the fact that all three of those guys were there, I think is a really big sign that they're going to very interested in Wilson. And also on top of that, all this talk of the Jets trading down. Apparently, San Francisco was very interested in getting Zach Wilson, and they gave up a lot to move up to 3. And the fact that the Jets, I would assume San Francisco maybe offered them even more to move up to 2, and the fact that the Jets said no. And also we know Douglas coming from Baltimore is a guy that's kind of, under the Ozzie Newsome idea of being a GM, trading back, accumulating picks. The fact that the Jets are staying in at 2 so far, to me, is a pretty clear sign that they're going to take a quarterback there, and I think it's going to be Wilson. And if that's the case, I'll be incredibly happy because he's the guy I want. I think he's got the natural talent, the ability. He's got that quick release, which I love, the ability to use arm angles. He's got a little bit of Matthew Stafford in him, a little bit of Justin Herbert in him. Obviously, there's talk of Mahomes and Rodgers. I don't want to go that far, but he's so intriguing. And with the draft, you never know with any of these guys. Even Lawrence, who everyone's saying he's going to be the perfect pro comp, transition's going to be so smooth. You never know. So it's a gamble for everyone, and Wilson is the guy I'm willing to gamble on.
He's if you talk about it like that, he's definitely the most he's the most upside. So to me, you can definitely see that. And to me, you talk about Darnold. I was looking at Tannehill when he went from obviously Gase in Miami to with the Titans, and he just got so much better. And that's not. Look, nothing against Ryan Tannehill, but that's not just him. That was the whole situation. And who knows? Maybe Darnold, if he goes somewhere, he can do the same thing. But just shows you Gase is just such a QB killer, an offense killer. I just don't know how he got a second job. I'm sorry. I knew that was.
I don't know either. I have no idea.
It makes no sense. I'm sorry. I had to get that out of the way. But Wilson, he's also a guy that this whole new Jets regime, he's going to make the highlights. He's going to make the big plays. And, he's someone that, you see his potential and it's there. It's just can the Jets, can they coach him up to be that? Maybe Mike LaFleur, he's the guy, especially coming from this new age of, offense where you spread him out and do all that stuff. Kind of similar to what Mahomes does and that type of stuff. It'll be very interesting to see what he can do, how the Jets could build around him if that was the case. Because obviously you look at all these great, quarterbacks, they got great weapons around them as well. So that will be something, especially if he starts to progress and stuff like that. But Wilson's just one heck of a prospect. And I do want to move over to another really one heck of a prospect, and that is Justin Fields. And there was some news about him with Dan Orlovsky saying he's the last guy in and the first guy out, which, you had Kirk Herbstreit call it reckless, just straight reckless. So that's something that I don't think is true. You just look at what he did in the national championship, semifinal, where he was playing with broken ribs and, he outdueled Trevor Lawrence, whatever you want to talk about that. He did play better than Lawrence in that game. And you just see that he, to me, will be more of a pro-ready guy than Wilson. And maybe that would be better for the Jets. But then also, you look at that, I don't think his ceiling is as high as a guy like Wilson. But to me, he's definitely 2 or 3. And then you have, some people with the 49ers, if they're going to take Mac Jones at 3, which I think would be a huge, huge mistake. And yeah. I honestly, I think that's just a smoke screen so they can, take a guy like Justin Fields. But to me, he's a guy that, he can run, he can pass. He's, pretty good at reading defenses, but that could be an issue. I mean, really for any rookie, again, you don't know what you're getting out of him, but I think he definitely has more pro skills when you're looking at Wilson. He played at Ohio State, he played some better competition, which again, the NFL is still the NFL. It's much higher than any college game, but still that's something to be talked about. And I don't know, I'm kind of high on both of these guys for different reasons, but it should be Lawrence 1, Wilson, or Fields 2 and 3. Like anyone else in the conversation, like Mac Jones, I think he's all right. I think Trey Lance, I think they'll probably be in the top 10, but they're not top 3. I mean, it's like these 3 guys are definitely the best.
Yeah, I mean, with Justin Fields, look, I do think that he's probably, going into before, obviously we got into all these pro days and the draft buildup, he was pretty much for a while, at least obviously early on in the NFL season, and then, college football was still going on. Most people consider him like the consensus number 2 quarterback. So I do definitely think, he's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle with all the Wilson hype. I still prefer Wilson personally, just because he just looks so loose out there, looks so comfortable. Like he just looks like the guy, he looks like a guy who could be that quarterback of the future. Look, Fields, I like you said, I don't buy that stuff about him not being like a good leader. I think the fact that he's played so injured shows that he is one. I don't think he's going to be Dwayne Haskins. Yeah. I don't think he's going to be that kind of but my larger point is though, with the Ohio State quarterbacks is I understand like people say this doesn't mean anything, but when all these quarterbacks played so close together in a very similar system. So, you had JT Barrett, you had Cardell Jones, you had Braxton Miller, obviously you had Dwayne Haskins, Terrell Pryor. That's going a little further back still, but they all come play in a similar system at Ohio State, kind of all have very well, there's differences between them. Cardell was more of like a pocket guy, and some of them are more mobile than others. But the fact that they all played in the system and none of them have really translated to the NFL. I understand that people say it doesn't really mean anything, but look, they said the same thing about Darnold coming out of USC, and now look what's happened. So I'm not going to buy that completely. And on the flip side of that, I know BYU isn't a powerhouse school for quarterbacks, and I understand Steve Young went there 30 years ago or 40 years ago, but it's always kind of interesting to look back on the quarterbacks that have come out and see what's kind of happened. But in terms of competition level, I don't really put a lot of stock into that, just because look, for every college player, the NFL competition is higher. So sure, if you play at Alabama, LSU, are you going to play better players? Sure. But at the end of the day, everyone's playing better players. The competition level is the highest. Everyone's going to have to adapt. So I don't put a whole lot of stock into that. And, also it's sometimes you also got to think about the level of talent around Wilson. I mean, he's throwing to guys, wide receivers who are honestly going to be working at a real estate firm in a few months. They're not making the league. So there's a lot of different factors to consider. Look, if the Jets took 2 at Justin Fields at 2, I wouldn't be super upset. What am I talking about? I'd be upset. I really want Zach Wilson, but I think Justin Fields can be very good. And I think he seems to be the guy for San Francisco at 3. Like you said, there's been talk of Mac Jones. I don't really buy that. There's been talk of Mac Jones with the Patriots. Who knows what they're thinking with quarterback? I don't think Cam is the long-term answer. The question is whether they can trade up and get someone, or anyone will fall to them. Bill isn't really someone that's ever traded up before. I don't think he's not really that type of guy, but his draft acumen isn't exactly his track record isn't the best. So look, it's very intriguing what's going to happen with these quarterbacks. I can't deny that Zach Wilson is the one that I'm most interested in, but I think all of them had the potential to succeed at the next level.
I mean, before I make my point, BYU quarterbacks got to talk about Taysom Hill.
Of course, Taysom Hill. Well, Steve, I start off with the Hall of Famer. I could also mention Jim McMahon as well. But obviously, look, the track record thing is, who knows how much that really means, but it's something interesting to think about.
I mean, to me, I think Ohio State is because you're right. Not a lot of Ohio State quarterbacks have hit, but every prospect's different, and I don't think teams look at they're looking for intangibles. They're looking for different skill sets. I mean, I don't think they're looking at he was really good at Ohio State. It's we know we're going to draft him high. So I don't think every quarterback's the same. And you talk about how Haskins, he had a big arm, Cardell Jones had a big arm, whereas guys Braxton Miller, smaller arms, I mean, Fields, I think he has a good arm, not as good as Haskins, but I think he's still good. Definitely probably not as good as Wilson, but still really solid. That's what I'm talking about. He's more of that. I just think he's more of a safer bet, but I mean, I could definitely see the Jets kind of taking that leap for Wilson. And hey, that's a really good pick. I mean, I've been high on Wilson for a while, so that's not something I would be, mad about, for if I was a Jets fan, because I mean, you just look at those, as I said, those physical intangibles, they're just there. And then you were talking about Mac Jones and him going to the Patriots. You saw Bill Belichick just shaking him off at his pro day because he missed, I think, a deep throw by a good amount. I think he overthrew him, and then Bill Belichick was just shaking his head.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And I mean, you talk about Mac Jones just real quick. I mean, the numbers, I think, at Alabama, they speak for themselves. 41 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. Had that great talent though, and like you have to talk about that, throwing to open receivers. And now he has to adjust playing at the NFL level where, you're not going to have 5 yards of separation. You're just not.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just not how it works. And that's something that I don't think, just looking at it, I don't know if it's going to be like top 10 pick. I think it's too much. Like I wouldn't gamble on that. Now he may still be a really good passer, and it may be working out, but I just top 10. I mean, looking at, I don't know who would go up to pick him. I think when you move up to like 15, maybe like that's where I probably go with Jones. I mean, I think Trey Lance is more of the complete prospect when looking at a guy between him and Jones. So, I mean, that's just kind of my, when looking at the quarterbacks, kind of where it all shapes out. But, we'll have to see come April. Maybe there'll be another big trade. I mean, but I think that's interesting. But that will wrap up here our talk about the NFL and then the NFL draft. Next, we'll be talking some college basketball with some headlines. We'll bring back Kayla for that. But first, we are going to take a quick break. You are listening to One on One on 90.7 FM.
One on One has a brand new YouTube channel. Subscribe to WFUV Sports to catch our simulcast Saturday nights and get notifications so you never miss another show. Miss the show? You can find on-demand segments, interviews, and highlights every week. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics. It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
Hi everyone, I'm Kayla Wentzel. Pleased to be joining Andrew Gullota and Michael Leegan, and welcome to our final hour of One on One. We're going to switch over to a little bit of basketball news now. So on Thursday, after 33 seasons as a head coach and 18 seasons with the Tar Heels, Roy Williams retired. He had a truly prolific career with over 900 career wins and 3 national championships. The program is now seeking only its 6th coach since 1952, which is incredible. But so Andrew, now that they're looking for only their number 6 coach, where do you see this program going for the future?
First of all, that's pretty crazy. I didn't know that six coaches and that's
50,
crazy amount.
60, 70 years. I think it's like 70 years,
so
only 5 coaches.
That's a pretty good track record. And,
it's not Fordham.
Yeah, it's not Fordham. And that's what, Roy Williams does. He's a guy that, you said all the accolades, like really great coach, built a great program there, but then also built it at Kansas as well. So, you're a good coach when you could build two good programs and make the Final Four for two different schools. So definitely congrats for him on retirement. I mean, I know these last 2 years were tough for Carolina. They had a bad year before everything got stopped for COVID. And then this year they got bounced in the first round. But I mean, for him, definitely congrats on his retirement. And now it's like, where do they go from here? You had Hall of Fame coach Larry Brown saying that Williams should be able to pick his successor, which I thought was really interesting. But it seems like the AD and the chancellor, they're going to handle that process, which will definitely be something to watch out for. And there's really two avenues they can go to. They can go to that like Roy Williams coaching tree. So guys like Wes Miller, who is the coach of UNC Greensboro. So kind of, more local. He was on Roy Williams' national championship team in 2005. Jared Hayes, he's another guy who coached under Williams. And then, you have Hubert Davis, who also was at UNC for like 9 years. So if they wanted to stay interior, those would probably be the candidates, probably, the less big names, but they may be more safer picks. And then, there's always the big names. You look at guys from the NBA, like Brad Stevens. He's always, I think, talked about going back to college after all the success he had at Butler. And maybe, looking at the Celtics, does he think that job has kind of went a little stale for him? I think that's interesting. Billy Donovan, he had a lot of success at Florida. Does he want to come back and coach in the college level? Same with John Beilein, was, not a good coach for the Cavs, but was really good at Michigan. And then the hot name right now in college basketball would be Porter Moser, who just led, Loyola Chicago to another Sweet 16, outcome here in the tournament. So those are kind of the names I would, want. I mean, I'm a big Porter Moser fan, so if he gets it, like, I'd be happy with that. But I don't know. I could see them also going, kind of interior with that Williams coaching tree.
Yeah, I mean, first off, before I get into some of these replacements, I just think that, it's just crazy to think that we're going to be watching UNC, and not to see Roy Williams on the sideline. I mean, he's when you think about college basketball head coaches, at least from our generation or the last 20 years, like Coach K, Jim Boeheim, Roy Williams, like there's icons of the game. And of course, speaking of those names, he's, third all time in wins behind the both of them. So, he's a crazy career with all the titles, and a lot of people forget what he did at Kansas. Cause I mean, we'll think of him UMC, but 4 Final Fours with them. Also, like, the crazy thing about, like, he was an assistant for UNC when Michael Jordan was there. And think of all the great NBA players that have come through UNC when he was there. And also, how can we forget the classic memes that Roy Williams has produced, like when he was walking into the locker room all hyped, that one meme video that we all see. So we're thinking for that. But in terms of replacements, I think, look, UNC is a very storied program. They're gonna get their pick. I mean, if you think about the top college basketball programs in the nation, it's top 5 always. I mean, regardless of how well the team is doing, you're gonna want a guy there. I do think Billy Donovan, the idea of, because look, I mean, the Bulls, I mean, it's debatable whether they'll make the playoffs this year. Probably not. Like, with the playing game, who knows? He was obviously much better in college when he was at Florida. And when it comes to these guys that go from college to the NBA, when they don't find success at the NBA level, I mean, you think all the way back to like Rick Pitino, like, he was coach of the Knicks, if, no, we weren't alive, but he was a coach of the Knicks and like, whatever. And then he went back to college and went back to the NBA. Like, Coach K, I mean, not Coach K, John Calipari was, coaching in the NBA, coached the Nets. So like, it's the guys that don't find success in the NBA tend to come back to college. And I think Billy Donovan kind of fits that bill, especially when he was more successful in college. I think Brad Stevens is interesting because, look, the Celtics have been great since he's been there, but they haven't gotten over the hump. So are we kind of at a situation here, almost like a Joe Girardi with the Yankees kind of situation, where it's like you consistently win. I mean, this year they're not doing so hot, but they haven't gotten over the hill. They haven't made that final push. Could a change of coach be what they need? Who knows with that? I think those names are kind of interesting. But one name, and I'll throw this out there, and who knows how realistic it is, Mark Few, Gonzaga. Look, Gonzaga, this team may be one of the best teams in college basketball history. It's been talked about like that. Gonzaga has been a winner for the past few years. It's hard to imagine that he would leave. But if there was one team that you would leave Gonzaga for, or a couple of teams, there would probably be Duke, UNC, and that's honestly probably about it. So could they maybe poach him away from Gonzaga? It would be incredibly tough. I don't know how likely that would be, but you never know. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that Roy Williams was such a staple. And so it'll definitely be weird not to see him there next time. And I do kind of feel like he should have a hand in picking his successor because he really built up the UNC program, 18 seasons. I mean, like, I would be mad if I didn't get to pick my successor after like 20 years of the program and then they pick someone I didn't like. So I think that hopefully he should be a part of that decision. But yeah, I think Mark Few is an interesting name. I think that Brad Stevens is an interesting point. I think personally, they'll probably keep it within the organization only because they said that they had 6 coaches or 5 coaches in 70 years. So it seems like it's a very like familial type of environment in that they don't want someone to come for a season or 2 and then leave. That's not the UNC program. That's not the way it goes. And so I think that the people who are already have shown dedication to their program are probably the ones who are going to get precedence over other outside candidates because they're looking for somebody to stay. They're not looking for someone to come, change their program a bit, and then go. They want someone who's going to be there 19 years, you know what I mean? 18 seasons. And so I'm not sure that like Mark Few is that type of guy. He's done a great job with Gonzaga, but I think that if he leaves Gonzaga, then that kind of shows that he isn't that type of guy. You know what I mean? Like that he's not one to stay around for the long haul for it all. I mean, he would go out on such a high level. I mean, Gonzaga is one of the best teams right now in the country. But then if he were to leave that, I think that would be a little telling that he, I don't know, maybe wouldn't want to stick with a program for as long as they are clearly looking for somebody to stick with their program. So I think that an NBA coach coming down also kind of seems a little unlikely to me. I mean, I guess it depends on the coach. Maybe Brad Stevens or Billy Donovan, who haven't had as much success in the NBA, would want to come to UNC, but I don't know. That doesn't quite seem like UNC's MO to me.
Yeah. I mean, even Roy Williams himself, he was an assistant before, and then he left and then came back. So I think that's definitely true. They definitely want someone with, at least be familiar with the program, coach there. So, I mean, like I can definitely see that. I mean, it's just really interesting because it's really the pinnacle of college basketball coaching at UNC. I just don't see a guy like Mark Few leaving. Like he built the program himself. Like if you built it yourself, you're not going to then just leave. I think he'd probably be there for life. I know like Bill Self from Kansas, he signed like a lifetime contract just a few days ago. I wouldn't be surprised if Mark Few does the same because he's just had so much success building that program. And now you're just going to leave. I mean, to me, like, I don't think he's that type of guy either. Like, I mean, it would be a little, suspect. I mean, so that's interesting. I mean, Brad Stevens, I think he's a guy that does build programs. I mean, even with the Celtics, I felt like he's built something there. It just hasn't, really amounted to any, championships, but still a good program they've created in Boston. So maybe he's a guy to come back. Obviously, was great with Butler. But, I mean, I don't know. It'll be interesting. But I could definitely see someone inside the UNC coaching bubble really taking over here and trying to continue that great tradition they have.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, UNC, they're going to be able to get a very qualified candidate, and they're going to be able to get top recruits. It's going to be interesting to see who they get. I'm very intrigued by what's going on going forward. And I mean, it's just going to be very strange to watch UNC and not see Roy Williams there. That's the biggest takeaway for me.
Yeah. And I think also though, like UNC isn't looking for someone to build their program. They're looking for someone to sustain their program. Their program's built. It's built and it's good. And they don't want anyone to come in and then try to rebuild them. I mean, I guess they had a bad year this year. So I guess you could say that they needed a rebuilding. But I would say on the basis, they want someone to enhance the program that they already have rather than come in and make a new program. Unlike Fordham, though, where Fordham
great transition
to come right in. Yeah, perfect transition, guys. Where Fordham needs someone to come in and totally rebuild their program. And so they're hoping that Kyle Neptune is the guy. They hired Brooklyn native, Villanova assistant coach for 8 seasons. He's been a part of 2 national championships and 5 Big East titles. And now he is officially the Fordham men's basketball coach. So I personally am very excited about this hire. I think that Neptune is going to bring a lot to the table that Fordham does not have yet. But Michael, what do you think about it?
I'm thrilled with the hire. I think it's great. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I was like researching every college basketball assistant and like low level head coach and say, oh, this guy would be great for Fordham. But from knowing about Kyle Neptune now and seeing kind of what he's about, I think it's an excellent hire. I mean, number one, he's coming from a very, winning program. Jay Wright. I mean, if you're going to learn under a college basketball head coach, he's probably one of the best to learn from. He was there for, like 10 years. He also started off as like a video production guy, left, came back to be an assistant, tons of experience. Also like, our own Emmanuel Barbari, interviewed Kyle Neptune. And in the interview, he mentioned to him that like Jay Wright had released a statement about Neptune. And in that statement, he called him intelligent, creative, humble, loyal, and dedicated. And I obviously Kyle Neptune and Jay Wright know each other very well. He's not going to come out and say that he's terrible or anything, but to hear that from Jay Wright is obviously great, very refreshing. But at the end of the day, this is the kind of guy that Fordham needs, a guy with a proven history of winning, someone who knows how to win. And he knows what it's, also something interesting that I was kind of reading up on, apparently a lot of, Villanova's offensive success is directly attributed to Kyle Neptune. He drew up some of their plays that were pretty successful, some of the offensive schemes that they ran that were, kind of integral to their team. And obviously with Fordham, a team that has struggled to score points, we've been towards the bottom in the country of, offensive numbers. That's something that you like to see. But the biggest thing for me is recruiting, because we can talk about this. I want to hear your guys' thoughts, but having a New York guy from the city, from Brooklyn, I mean, New York is the basketball capital of the world. I don't care what anyone says. And, we've been missing out on getting local talent, guys that can help us win. So I think that's probably the biggest and best thing about this hire.
Yeah, for sure. And like, for me, it's like, he wanted to be here, Fordham wanted him. And like, it's really important that, like seems like he is very energized to take the job, and that's going to show in like obviously on the court, all that stuff, but in recruiting too, and being a local guy, as you said, both of you guys have said, it's definitely so important because there is so much talent. I mean, like how Fordham wasn't getting a guy like Obi Toppin who's from the area, and then he goes to another A-10 school in Ohio, like that's almost like a come on moment. Like you should be all over a guy like that, and I think Neptune will be. And, he's a guy that it just looks like the offense is there. Like, I love to hear that, especially because Fordham has just been anemic on offense. That's really the best way to describe it. I mean, he's going to at least bring some, hopefully running gun, you get some exciting games. And to me, like all that stuff put together, I mean, hopefully at the beginning you see some small improvements and then it builds, you get to see a program being built. And I think he can do it. And, it's something that's going to be really interesting. But I mean, looking at Fordham, like you should have the recruiting pool, like a nice one. You should have a lot of resources as well being in the city. And, you're playing in a good conference, A-10's a solid conference. So I think, there should be a lot of things that could push this program in the right direction. And I do think Neptune could be the guy to lead it.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly a lot of draws at Fordham that I feel like people or that previous coaching staff has not necessarily marketed as well. I think that there is a lot that Fordham has to offer a player and that we have to offer just as a university and as a school, not to be a spokesperson for them, but I would say that Fordham really does have a lot of draws to this program. And I think that Kyle Neptune is coming in with the right attitude. This is his first head coaching job. And it's a team that is terrible. So I think that both of those things combined he has nothing to lose by coming to this school. If he doesn't do anything great, then it's not any different than what has already occurred for us. And if he does do something great, then what a legacy he has created for himself for his first head coaching job to really build up a career. And in his interview with Emmanuel, he talked about how much he just wants to create a better culture around Fordham basketball and how much he wants to create a more winning culture, a more hardworking, a more driven mindset. And I think that is something that not only our team needs, but I think it's something our whole university needs. I mean, I think Father McShane introduced him as the new football coach. Like, we need a new culture in its entirety at Fordham to revitalize our system. Students don't go to Fordham basketball games. Even if it wasn't the pandemic, they're not sold out places. There isn't a culture or a mindset that we are a winning team and we're a winning school. And so I think that Kyle Neptune comes in with the right mindset, and he sees that this is not the environment and the atmosphere that Fordham has cultivated so far. And I think he recognizes that needs to shift first in order for all the things to fall into place. And that's something that he is going to be working on through his coaching staff that he's going to hire and just through his players and on his court. And so he had said, my only hobby that I know is basketball. I only play basketball. And I think that type of driven, focused, sole idea of basketball recruiting, creating a strong mindset is what Fordham needs to reset the clock for them. because there has been a lot of challenges so far. There's been a lot of failures so far, but they need someone to come in with the clear sight of what he's working with, and then with the vision on how to make it any better.
Well, first off, I just want to say we should call the fire department, because Kayla Wentzel had some blazing hot takes in her speech right there. I totally agree with all of them. Expert analysis of Fordham University. That was very well done, Kayla. But just to go off some other stuff that I kind of took away from Coach Neptune, and Kayla, you kind of talked about this. One of the things that he said was he wants to prioritize winning against other schools in New York City. Like, New York basketball is, it is great. I mean, seeing New Yorkers play each other in an intense game of basketball. No one plays basketball like New Yorkers. So to get a local program built up of local guys playing other local schools, I think that's great. And I think that could draw people back to Rose Hill. And another thing off of that is, in recent years, and I, as a student, you hear this, like, the Rose Hill gym has become sort of like, it's kind of looked down upon. It's like, where do you go? So we're going to Fordham. But like, we have this small basketball gym. Like, we don't really play in these big arenas. Like, it's people like, I had a friend of mine visit me, before COVID a year ago. And he's like, yeah, the place is so small. Like, it's viewed as a detriment. And, I think that what Coach Neptune said was he wants to make the Rose Hill gym a difficult place to play. And he wants to build off of that smaller claustrophobic environment, which when Fordham was good, which was like 100 years ago, they really built and played off of that small environment. It was a tough place to play because the fans were right on top of you. It was loud. It was claustrophobic for the opposing team. And that's something that's kind of been lost in the shuffle because no one goes to the games. And now the gym's kind of become like, oh, it's a small gym. And to hear the coach say that he wants to make Fordham this difficult place to play, this place where no other team wants to come. I mean, that's just so refreshing to hear. Like, you look at Duke with Cameron Indoor, like that's an older arena, just like Fordham. Like, we have the oldest, gym in the country or whatever. It's not as small as Fordham, but it's a smaller place. And Duke really uses that to their advantage. So, that's great to hear. And, I really want, it's probably not going to be, well, I'm still at Fordham, or Kayla, while you're still here. We only have another year left. But I really hope that we can get to that point where, like, Rose Hill is just rocking and that gym is just an electric place to play.
I hope so. I mean, because like it's almost like the Nassau Coliseums now. They're like really small, arena, but once it gets rocking, it's really crazy in there. And I think when you look at that team, the Islanders more of like a local team. You kind of feel that. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how Neptune builds the program. And the last thing I will say about him is that I like that he's coming from a Villanova. He's won national championships. I know it's as assistant, but still. He's part of a national championship team. He knows that culture. He knows what to do. And, you look at kind of a lot of guys that Fordham, has hired in the past, or maybe you're looking at, they're kind of guys from other conferences that are lower from them. They've head coach, but they've only been small, head coaching schools. So like now he's been at the big school. He knows the culture. And now, this is kind of his first head coaching job, kind of nothing to lose, I guess, for him. I mean, he kind of does have something to lose because if he's not successful, then he can't take that next step and may have to take maybe the backseat at another assistant coach job. But this is like his first big break. And, hopefully it all works out. I mean, it's just like everything around him right now is really positive. So we'll see. And like, as he said, he just wants to, make every team feel like, after they played Fordham and played in the Rose Hill gym, that we don't want to play them again. And I do really like that mindset of trying to, bring hell on the opponent and just trying to make, just trying to be a team that is really ultra competitive. And, especially in the A-10, like Fordham's always been at the bottom, been at the cellar. If they can be competitive, I do think that this, school spirit and playing a team like maybe at the top, like a Dayton or a St. Bonaventure, like you could definitely see like the electricity on campus if, everyone's good. I mean, I could definitely see that for sure. But I do think that'll wrap up our conversation with the college basketball coaching carousel. Next, me and Mike will be talking about the association, some NBA talk. Definitely have some great, talk about New York basketball. We have 2 New York pro teams playing really good right now. But first, we are going to take a quick break. You are listening to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show.
sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Back here on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I'm Andrew Gullota alongside Michael Leegan. We're now past 1 o'clock, so it's officially Easter Sunday here. So definitely happy Easter to everyone that celebrates. And, you know, when it hits Easter, that's always kind of, for me, the point in the NBA season where things start to get dicey and you start looking at, you know, who's going to make the playoffs, kind of this last run here as the season, you know, is starting to come to a close. I mean, NBA is such a long season, but definitely kind of Easter's that point where everything starts to kind of get a little interesting. And with both New York teams in the thick of a playoff spot between the Knicks and the Nets, I mean, it should be really, really fun to see how this season ends. And I do want to start off with the Nets just because, I mean, at this point, they're just a super team. I mean, you know, looking at their last game where LaMarcus Aldridge made his Nets debut, I mean, it's just crazy. They won by 22 and they were in control of Charlotte the whole night. They didn't have James Harden. They didn't have Kevin Durant. They only had Kyrie and obviously Aldridge. But like, in Charlotte was a really hot team coming into that. I think that at least, you know, a few days ago, they were the 4th seed. I don't know where they are now exactly, but they're right around there. And the Nets blew them out, basically shorthanded, not having 2 out of your 3 stars, which just shows they have the stars and now they're getting the depth. And this team it's almost starting to get unfair when looking at them. They've won, you know, 21 out of 24 games. I mean, it's just crazy amount. And they're really starting to play like one of those super teams. And I mean, to me, it's just like, it really is now championship or bust what they built this year. And especially, you know, what's going on with the Lakers and the injuries there, they may have themselves now an open window to, you know, go out and really win a championship, you know, and be serious about it.
Yeah. I mean, you know, like you mentioned, with they've just been on a hot streak recently. I mean, they were 11-2 in the month of March. I mean, they're just on fire, and now they're in sole position of first place for the first time since 2003. With, I mean, passing 1 game in the season, you know, so like it's the you know, just the fact that this team is insane, and also they've been doing this without Kevin Durant. I mean, he's been out since February 26th with that hamstring strain. So I mean, the fact that they've been doing this with just, you know, even Kyrie, you know, hasn't always been like. Some nights it's just been Harden, some nights it's been Kyrie. This team is so deep, it is insane. I mean, you know, LaMarcus Aldridge and, you know, and Blake Griffin, these guys, you know, aren't what they were, but they're not being asked to be those guys. You know, they're being asked to be the supporting characters in this and on this team. And, you know, they're playing their roles. And honestly, it's kind of funny. I saw like a video on Twitter, and it was like, you know, that famous clip of Willy Wonka, like walking out of the chocolate factory when he's injured, like faking an injury, and he does the cartwheel and he's totally fine. Like they said, oh, this is Blake Griffin going from like the Pistons to the Nets. And it is kind of funny to think about how like these guys are like washed up and they come to the Nets and now they're like pretty good again. So look, Brooklyn, honestly, and I said it off the top of the show, you know, it's championship or bust for them. This team with the Lakers, with AD being out, you know, pretty much most of the season, he's been hurt for a while, and LeBron being hurt, and you know, this big three, you know, with the supporting, you know, characters and you know, cast, and I just don't envision a scenario where let's just say both teams were completely healthy, the full Nets team, full Lakers team in the finals. I'm a LeBron guy. I love LeBron. I root for the Lakers because I don't really care about the Nets, you know, whatever. But it's just like, I don't see a scenario where both teams at full strength where the Nets don't win 4 out of 7. I just don't see that happening. And, you know, it's a crazy team. And also interesting, just kind of go off my other point, you know, like, and you mentioned off the top too, like the Nets are the best team in the NBA and nobody cares. Like nobody says a word about them in the tri-state area. Like, I listen to The Fan religiously. I think you do, Andrew, too. And like, nobody calls about the Nets. Like nobody cares about them. It's all Nick calls. Like nobody, it's insane to me. Now for the Net fans out there, I'm happy for you. You're doing well. But it's kind of funny to think that like this team is like by far the best team in the NBA, maybe one of the better teams in a few years, and like nobody cares.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at New York basketball, it's probably one of the best teams, ever. I'm just looking at Knicks Nets.
Yeah.
When you talk about that, and like no one's really talking about them, which is just crazy. I mean, I just don't understand. And I mean, for them, it's like, especially because like Durant hasn't played a lot. I think he will fit in there really well too, because he's the type of star that I think he's played with a bunch of stars before. Like getting him back in the offense, back, on the floor, I don't think will be an issue for them. And it's just like, he got the 3 stars. Then you have, beyond even Griffin and Aldridge, they still have Joe Harris, Jeff Green's playing really good. DeAndre Jordan's still there. I mean, Nick Claxton's playing good off the bench as well. It's like, it's an embarrassment of riches. And like looking at this team, it's like, it'll be very interesting to see if they get the Lakers at full strength, because I think that's the only team that can stop them. Definitely no in the Eastern Conference. And there are some good teams in the East. I'm not going to, say that, but nowhere to close to this Nets team. I mean, they're just, and also now they're firing on all cylinders right now. I mean, like even when they were, playing close games, like Steve Nash and the team, they were a little upset that they were playing close games and they're still winning the games. Like to me, that's just crazy. It's almost unfair. And like just looking at, this Nets team, it's really like now sky's the limit. And now, going past Easter, now it's getting into that dicey time. Got to get back everyone healthy so they can make, this run. So that's definitely going to be very interesting. But moving it over to the more popular basketball team, which is crazy because they're 24-25. Still in the playoff hunt for sure. And right now it's, they're still holding tough, the Knicks. I mean, I will say that. And I mean, now they have 3 tough losses, here. They're on a 3-game losing streak. But I mean, to me, I'm surprised at the Knicks team because they sustained their pace. Like, I didn't think they would sustain this 500 pace just going into the season. Like, even when they were like 10-10, I was like, oh, that's a nice start. But they'll lose 10 straight and be out of it. And then they were 20, like 15-15. I was like, oh, that's nice. And then they'll lose a few games in a row. Just hasn't happened. And, looking at, I know the injuries may be adding up a bit with, Mitchell Robinson, he broke his hand earlier, came back now, broke his foot, had surgery. So it seems like he'll be, out, for the season, but it's just a fun team. It's a fun team to watch. Feels like they're playing with house money a bit, which is something, when you watch them, you kind of get that feeling. And, I've been kind of a skeptic saying that they'll eventually drop off. I don't think they're going to drop off. I think they'll be around 500, be a playoff team. And look, I mean, meaningful games in the Garden, for the playoffs. I mean, that's all, right now coming into the season. I mean, if you would have told me, back in, December that the Knicks would be playing playoff games in the Garden, I'd be so happy.
Yeah. I mean, with the Knicks, I think I'm pretty confident with the playoffs. I mean, they're at the 6th seat right now. Obviously they've fallen a little from the 5th with some of these losses. 10 teams made the playoffs this year with the playing game. So, I mean, I find it hard to believe that the Knicks, given the fact that Julius Randle has played like an MVP for most of the season, given the fact that, Emmanuel Quickley's had a great rookie year and, Alec Burks have been great and they've gotten good production from, different players, that I find it hard to believe also with Thibodeau's coaching that they're not going to finish in the top 10. So I like to believe, and I'm pretty confident they're going to finish and make the playoffs. I guess the real question is how far are they going to go? Look, like you said, the Knicks are playing with house money. This team honestly reminds me a lot of that Nets team from a few years ago prior to Kevin Durant and Kyrie getting here, when it was like Spencer Dinwiddie, D'Angelo Russell, Jared Allen, like these young guys who were being coached up, who made kind of a surprise playoff push. And, they didn't do any real damage, but it was still fun for the Net fans too that exist. For the Knicks, it's like kind of a similar situation. I think anything they could do, I think it's possible they could win a series. I mean, this team plays hard, they're coached well, and I wouldn't count them out. And I mean, even when I know they played Brooklyn and the Nets weren't at full strength, but they played them tough. It was down to the wire. I mean, if we got a Knicks Nets playoff series, I mean, even if the Knicks lost, I think that would be such an amazing thing for the city, for the area. I mean, it would be electric, and I would just love to see that. I mean, I wouldn't expect the Knicks to win, but it would be a great thing to watch.
I mean, like, as you said, obviously playing with house money. And I mean, first of all, if they go up against the Nets, that would be, I mean, they probably get like swept or lose them 5, but that would be such a fun back and forth series. and like just hearing all the fans and stuff. I mean, especially just because Knicks fans obviously are more prominent in New York, as we all know, we've been saying throughout the show. So, I mean, like that would be definitely a sight to see. But I mean, that wouldn't be the matchup if I was the Knicks that I'd want in a playoff game. I think they could win a series if the matchup was right. But any playoff wins, like that's good. Like any experience that these young guys are getting is really big, and it's big for their development. You know, guys like, you know, RJ Barrett, you know, if he could take some big shots in a postseason game, that's really, really important to, you know, continue his development. Same with obviously Julius Randle and all the young guys that have quickly, all that stuff. But I mean, to me, this team, I mean, just, you know, going back, you know, if you would expect this team, you know, like I was thinking like, oh, like hopefully they get better than last year, but like playoffs isn't the goal. And like to them even be in the playoffs, I mean, it's a real surprise. I mean, you see the city, even when, you know, not a lot of fans are allowed in, you know, for the beginning of the season, no fans were allowed in, like to the Garden, just to see how excited the city got. I mean, it just shows you just, when the Knicks are good, I mean, New York is really just, it's a fun place to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think we said off the top, you know, with the Knicks, it's like most New Yorkers, most people in the area are Knicks fans. So it's a really unifying experience for the city when the Knicks are playing well, because the whole city's rocking. And of course, like our generation, we haven't really experienced that because the Knicks, you know, a lot of losing seasons, a lot of, you know, no playoff berths, you know, it really hasn't been, you know, a great last 20 years for the Knicks, to be perfectly honest. You know, the Knicks is kind of funny. The Knicks often get, you know, lumped together with the Yankees and Giants as like the prestige franchise, but the way that they play or to run, it's more like the Mets and the Jets. So, you know, that's always kind of something that I've kind of find amusing. You know, with this injury to Mitchell Robinson, though, like, you know, we mentioned before, he's a key part of their offense and their defense. I mean, he's a solid player, was a great value pick for them a few years ago. You know, he drafted the same year as Kevin Knox, and obviously he's been better than Kevin Knox. So, you know, a very good player, kind of similar with going on with Quickly and Toppin right now. But we'll give Toppin some time. But I just got kind of be interested to see how they kind of fill him at the center position. I mean, I know Nerlens Noel has been kind of playing there. He could play kind of a ferocious defense, but I mean, how much you got him? You know, Taj Gibson, you know, could play at the 5. They just signed Norvell Pele, I think his name is, to a 10-day contract. So, you know, see how he can do. At this point for the Knicks, it's about development. It's about finishing the season strong. And if they can get a playoff berth, I think that would just be a really great sign of the progress that they made this season, the sign that Leon Rose and Thibodeau really turned things around. And then, you know, whatever they do in the playoffs is great. And then from there, I think it's about, can they attract a free agent with their play? I mean, look at what the Nets did, like I said, with that D'Angelo Russell, Jared Allen team. You know, that was so appealing to them that they brought in Kyrie and KD, who wanted to come play for the Nets. So now you got the Knicks, you got Julius Randle, who I'm sure after the season, some stars are going to play with. You know, who can they get in a trade maybe, which I would kind of rather avoid, or a signing that can really kind of push this team over the edge?
Yeah, I mean, that to me is what I wanted to talk about next, is just like, you know, if this team is good enough to make the playoffs, then I think free agents would want to come. And I don't know if it'll be next year, because I know it's kind of a light free agent class when you're looking at like big stars. But I feel like going forward, if they're just an attractive place to play, that's huge. And maybe it's not next year, but if it's the year after and you continue to get better. And like, you know, that's something that's how the Nets did it. I mean, that's how the Nets have this, you know, ungodly team right now that's, you know, just unstoppable, it seems. It's because they built a foundation, a young foundation with the right culture. Then, you know, stars want to come, Durant, Kyrie, like the Knicks wanted, but they went to the Nets because they knew the culture was there. And, you know, they go to them, then they add kind of the extra big to build their big three with James Harden. And, you know, they had a few guys like veterans that just want, you know, to get, you know, a ring really. And then you have a really, really good team. And like, that's kind of the same path the Knicks are on. And that's, you know, really, really exciting when you're just like, if the Knicks could be as good as the Nets, like if that ever happened, that would be just, I mean, the city would be in shambles. I think it would just be completely insane, because like they would really, I mean, since in the last 40 years, they've never been like that good. So like, if that happens, like that would be just ultra crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously they were, you know, it's been, I would say since the 90s this team was really elite. Yeah, I mean, obviously they didn't win anything. But, you know, like my biggest question is, and I'll be interested to see what happens, is first off, the James Dolan effect. You know, we'll put it, you know, bluntly, Dolan has been a hindrance more than a helpfulness with this team. I mean, he has the money, which is great, but the thing is, you know, and I think Durant and Kyrie kind of even said this, or, you know, maybe kind of implied this, that like, you know, they wanted to play in, well, Kyrie he grew up a Nets fan, so that was part of it. But Dolan has kind of, besides Carmelo, has kind of always been like someone that I don't think players have wanted to play for. And the question is like, if the Knicks are good enough, and I'll give Dolan props for the last few years, he has been very behind the scenes. He's not really been out there in the public. Obviously there was the whole Charles Oakley, and then the Spike Lee thing, which is stupid, but
since then it's been pretty
for the most part, he's let Leon Rose kind of do his thing, and he's been reserved, and which I appreciate and I think is great for the team. And obviously they're playing well. Yeah, I just wonder if free agents, even if the Knicks are playing great and Julius Randle's still here, and also think about Julius, like an extension for him. He only signed a 4-year deal. He's going to have 2 years left. I think one of them is like an opt out or something. So we'll talk about that. But are they going to want to come? The other thing with Thibodeau is like, he is at his best when he's coaching up young guys. So the question is, are there going to be superstars going to want to play for him? Because he is a hard coach to play for. Now, I'm not one of these people that thinks that coaches need to be best friends with their players. I think that's ridiculous. I like a coach that works his players hard, gets the most out of them, is really a driving force and is a real coach. I think that's great. But like you saw when he was with, Minnesota, that him and Jimmy Butler didn't really have a great relationship. I don't know how he was with Karl Anthony Towns and all that, but I don't think that was great either. So, the question is going to be, the Knicks are really turning it around, but is Dolan going to be a hindrance to getting another superstar? Is Thibodeau going to be a hindrance to getting a future superstar? And, with the Nets, I keep bringing up them as an example because it's a very similar, track. They had to fire their old coach. God, what was his name? I don't remember his name. But you know who I'm talking about.
I know
we're not Net fans, so who cares? And probably half the city doesn't know who this guy is anyway. But are they going to have to fire their guy and then bring in a Steve Nash type who's better with superstars? Which I don't want because I think Thibodeau's a great coach. But
Kenny Atkinson, I think that's the
Kenny Atkinson. That was it. Look, people. No one is a Nets fan, and nobody cares. So we don't remember his name. But bottom line is that going to happen? So it'll be interesting. It's interesting to see what the Knicks do these next couple of years.
Yeah, for me, I don't know if Thibodeau will be that guy to get stars in, and they may have to do what the Nets did. Hire a guy like Nash, which because when I was thinking about Thibodeau and that hire, I was like, I feel like he'll stabilize the franchise and he'll probably get them to like a respectable level, which he's done a lot quicker, which is good. Because now at least they're respectable, but to really like take that championship level, I think they may need more, I don't want to say like just like a player's coach, but more like a player's coach. And that could really be with stars. And maybe not best friends. I don't know, if Steve Nash is like best friends with Durant and those guys, but they definitely like him. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. Maybe it'll be like a guy like Ty Lue or something, like someone like that knows how to handle stars. I think that's, especially when you have a short window, that's definitely going to be interesting. But who knows? Maybe Tibbs will turn it around and he'll be good with the stars. And maybe stars will want to play with him. It'll be really interesting to see that dynamic. But that's what I said from the jump when they hired him like a year ago. Like he'll stabilize the franchise, and he did that. And now it's just kind of like, how can he take the next step? But Knicks definitely a very interesting future, kind of long term. Nets more short term. But both franchises looking up, which is definitely huge for New York basketball. But I want to go national for a minute and talk about this JJ Redick story, which I thought was really interesting. Talking about the Pelicans front office going down to New Orleans, which I'm familiar with as a Saints fan, obviously. And talking about Redick, he criticized the Pelicans front office for the way they handled his trade to the Mavericks, because he said David Griffin didn't honor his word. He said that Griffin told him that he'd go to a situation that he liked, and he'd be able to be closer to his family who's in Brooklyn. And then there were kind of rumblings that he was gonna get released, and then obviously going to the Nets. Like that was kind of his plan if that was going to happen. Bought out, that was the word I was looking for. If that, and he'd go to the Nets. That didn't happen, so he ends up going to the Mavs, which was like a team he didn't really want to go for, not closer to his family, actually farther away. So he was upset about that, said it on his podcast, and he said it was nothing against the Mavs, but this was kind of like he was definitely taken back by that situation, and he said he wanted to get traded because Drew Holiday, he left New Orleans, and that was the reason he came. And then Coach Stan Van Gundy said that Griffin has a responsibility to the organization that supersedes his promises to Redick, which I thought was really interesting, because New Orleans, they have 2 number 1 picks over the last few years. Anthony Davis, he left, and now you have Zion, who are both of these talents. They're looking like they're going to be like top 10 players, top 5 players. And that usually doesn't happen. Like usually you don't get 2 chances at that. And now, if they're going to mess this up, going forward, and that front office is going to be an issue as they're looking to rebuild. That could be a real hindrance as, I mean, especially after Van Gundy said it, the organization supersedes, his promises to Redick, which, especially in the NBA where it's players first, I thought that was pretty interesting. But, that was just, it was just an interesting situation that, I feel like in this player first league is something that could be worrisome for the Pelicans.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway with this is like, it kind of raises this question of, what responsibility does a team or front office have in regard to a player's, personal life or personal situation versus their responsibilities as like an employer and doing what's best for the franchise? Like, the best deal for the Pelicans in terms of compensation was the Mavericks, then, trade in there. But, after all, this is like anything, it's a business, and a business is about the people. And, especially with COVID, things are so different. And, now more than ever, I think people are really like valuing time with their family because you never know what's going to happen and it could be taken away in a second. And Redick has a young son. So, I understand where he's coming from. And if it's true that Griffin, made this promise to him, like, hey, if he really gave his word and said, we're going to try to trade you to a better situation, and if it doesn't work, we'll release you and let you sign somewhere else. Because to be honest, how much are you really getting for JJ Redick at this stage of the game? So, I really, it raises an interesting dilemma in terms of like, what is that organization's responsibility to players? But also it's like, if Griffin really did make these promises, and let's just say, maybe who knows, maybe Redick just made this all up, which I don't really think you would, but I honestly would agree with Redick. How can you trust the front office? I get that they have a responsibility to do what's best for the team, but if this guy gave you his word and he's the one in charge of the basketball operations, and he literally said, if we can't get you a trade, assuming he said this, we're going to release you so you can go where you want. I find that kind of, very, if I'm a player, I do find that I'd be, not willing to trust the organization. And like you said, with Zion, like, you're becoming one of the better young stars in the game. I still question whether he's going to be like this all-time great. I have some questions about durability, size, all that. But he made All-Star team this year. He's shown that he could be a good player. Like, he's a good guy. He can have a career in the
He's going to get a big contract, I think.
Yeah. Everyone in the NBA gets a big contract. Yeah. Lonzo Ball wants like, $25 million a year or some crazy number. Like, he doesn't deserve that. But the point is, Zion's going to come to time when he's going to have to make a decision. And if you have this track record of the organization, not trusting people, and also you have like Anthony Davis, he hated it in New Orleans. He had to get out. And that's obviously prior to David Griffin being there, if I'm not mistaken. But, it raises some red flags for him. And selfishly, as a Knicks fan, I would love to see him not sign, and we'll get a reuniting of RJ Barrett in Zion in New York City. Because we all know that Zion wanted to go to New York that whole time. It was kind of obvious. At least to me it was. So that would be amazing. Imagine, I don't know how you'd space the floor with Zion and Julius, but it'd be very interesting to see. But this is like a hypothetical dream scenario.
Oh, I wish. I was a big Zion guy when he's coming out of Duke. I was like, the Knicks will get the number 1 pick, and obviously it didn't come to fruition. But just like, can you trust them? And like when you Zion a guy like, what if David Griffin says, he promises them, we're going to go out and try to, get some free agents to surround you with. And then he doesn't. And it's like, can you really trust someone? And I just don't understand why, if you're David Griffin, you put out a promise to JJ Redick. Like, if you didn't think that was going to happen, you don't make the promise. Like, even if there was like 5% that this may not happen, don't say don't say we're definitely going to trade you to somewhere you want to go. Like, to me, that's just like, it doesn't make much sense. And again, like when you're trying to build, a really successful team here, and you need stars to do that, when, you kind of back away from promises, that's going to definitely tempt away other stars. So it'll be definitely interesting to see how that situation works out down in New Orleans. But I think that is going to wrap up our association talk with the NBA. Next, we'll be joined by Kayla Wentzel, finishing off the show with some baseball predictions. Definitely should be really fun. But first, we are going to take our last quick break. You are listening to One on One.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Here on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I'm Andrew Gullota alongside Mike Leegan and also Kayla Wentzel. And now let's finish off the show with some baseball predictions. Always really fun. I mean, I think baseball's also that sport just so long that these predictions, when you look back in October, they could be very, very different. But I do want to start off with the most grandest one, World Series predictions. And Kayla, we'll start off with you. What's your World Series prediction here?
Okay, well, I went a little different. I don't know. I'm picking the Dodgers are going to beat the White Sox. That's what I decided. I went with the Chicago White Sox. I was really thinking about who I wanted for the American League. And I don't know. I wanted to have some confidence. I feel like the White Sox, you almost never hear about them, really. They're kind of under the radar, but they have a really good team this year. They have a really strong pitching rotation, and they're supposed to be a really solid team. So I kind of went out on a limb, and I'm hoping that the White Sox will pull through for me.
Yeah, for me, my World Series matchup prediction, I teased at the top. I do have the Yankees getting to the World Series. Now, that kind of pains me to say that because I really don't want them to get there. But I think the American League is pretty weak, to be honest. I mean, nobody in the West scares me. I think the Astros are still kind of like whatever. I know they got kind of close last year, but last year was COVID. The A's are okay. The White Sox, I think are good, but I like to see them take another step. Like I don't want to come out and say that I think they're going to make it yet. And then in the AL East,
why not?
I
no idea what they'll do.
I mean, okay, they have Tim Anderson. That's wonderful. Like I don't know what
they
to
don't
be
just
super
have
excited
Tim
about.
Anderson.
I know. But and then in the AL East, the Yankees. If the Yankees starting pitching can hold its own, I really think they're going to be the team to beat. Much as that hurts me to say. And then for the National League, look, I hate the Dodgers, and I'm so tired of them being in the World Series all the time. Now, last year they finally won, unfortunately. But the NL I think is far more competitive. But I'm going to go a little bit. I mean, I don't think this is crazy out of the box, but I'm going to go Yankees, Padres in the World Series. I'm at the Padres winning in 7 games. All right, I'm going to go really detailed on this pick.
Oh, wow.
And the reason why I just can't bring myself to pick the Dodgers, but what draws me to the Padres is last year they were such a fun team to watch. The whole Slam Diego thing, that's great. My fantasy baseball team was populated entirely of almost San Diego Padres because they have incredibly good. Well, last year they did position players, and now this year they added the starting pitching. They got Yu Darvish, who was in contention for the Cy Young last year. They had Blake Snell. They brought in Blake Snell, who honestly was kind of got screwed over in the World Series last year by his manager. Joe Musgrove. He'll be good. And then just look at the positions. You got Fernando Tatis, who in my opinion is the most exciting young player in the game. Manny Machado, who is still a decent player. Will Myers, who I think is very slept on. He's still a great bat. Eric Hosmer can still hold his own. Jake Cronenworth, who had a great rookie season. Tommy Pham. I think this is a really good team, and I think they're going to win the World Series this year.
So my brother will be very happy about that. He's a huge San Diego Padres fan, so. That's good. Like I'm like, for the Padres, like I'm happy for them, especially because seeing him, they're just never good. So I'm happy that they're good. So he would be very happy with that prediction. And Kayla, I think you're going to be happy with my prediction because I have the White Sox making the World Series as well. I thought I was going to be the one going out on the limb, but I'm not. And Mike, you said that you can't bring yourself to pick the Dodgers. I can't bring myself to pick the Yankees because they didn't get better in my mind and they lost in the ALDS. So they're going to need some, internally get better with some of their guys, and they're going to have to get much better because they're going to have to obviously not just win one series, they're going to have to win two to make it to the World Series. And I feel like the AL is wide open. And I think, when it's wide open like that, I just don't see, the Yankees right now doing it. I think the White Sox, I think they'll actually add pitching at the deadline as well. I know they have Giolito and Lance Lynn, which is a good 1-2 combo, but I think for, going into the playoffs, if they can add one more, I think that may be the difference. Like who's going to add at the deadline? Like if the Yankees add another starter at the deadline, I could definitely see them making the World Series. And that's what baseball's so fun. The trade deadline's always really active. So again, I feel like the White Sox, I don't know, I like what they're doing on offense too. I mean, it's not just, Tim Anderson, see what they're doing. Jose Abreu, obviously, all that young talent that's there. I know Eloy Jimenez, he got hurt, but I still really like this team. You have a kind of old manager with Tony La Russa, which is kind of weird, but
I totally forgot he was the manager. I'm really glad I did not pick the White Sox now.
It's kind of weird, but I like how he's like kind of like the grandfather to the team, and it's kind of
grandfather. He's like should be in a nursing home. The guy's like 80 years old.
But I'm going to go with them, and then I'll go with the Dodgers as well. I do actually think if the Mets ever got up against the Dodgers, and I think they will, because I think the Mets will have a wild card spot and win the wild card game with DeGrom. I think in that series, that would be a really good series. And that's my team to, like, if the Mets got in, I think they would be a fun team in the playoffs because I think they're built for the playoffs. So, I mean, I don't know how that's all going to, their depth is going to play out. But if they come back healthy with DeGrom, Syndergaard, Carrasco, maybe Taijuan Walker as well, that starting pitching is just crazy good. And, we'll have to see if the depth holds up. And I think that's kind of going to be their question. But I'll have to go with the safe pick with the Dodgers. They're still far and above the best team. And I'll have them winning it as well. Dodgers go back to back. I mean, sorry for the White Sox. I can't bring myself to it. I think the Dodgers either. I think the Dodgers still have more left in them because there was only 60-game season. I feel like they could definitely go back at it. And I think they end up doing it here. But definitely should be, that would be a fun World Series in my mind. But next, I do want to move over to the over-unders here and, of some of our local teams. And I want to start off with the Mets, the upstart Mets. Right now, they're at 90.5 wins for the season. Michael, start off with you. Over-under for the Mets.
So I'm incredibly notorious mush on things. So usually when I say the opposite happens. But so I'm going to be bold. I'm just going to take the over. Now, I really think this team can win more than I think they can win 92, 91 games. I think they're gonna have I think they have a really solid season. Now my fear is because I said this, they're gonna be terrible. They'll win like 70 games. Everyone will be hurt. Of course, it's gonna happen now. But I'll take a leap of faith, and I'm just gonna say over on the Mets. They have so much talent. I think this, like I said when we were talking about the Mets earlier, this lineup is so incredibly deep. And you add to that this great starting pitching rotation, which is only going to be helped by people returning from injury, assuming they can get back in time. I'm very excited as a Mets fan this season. I'm really looking forward to Monday now. Unfortunately, it took so long, but I think I like the Mets on the over for the 90.5.
So I picked the Mets on the under. Not a lot, not by much. But when I was prepping for the show, I was talking to my dad, and he was like, "You can't pick the Mets on the over. You can't do that to me." So I was like, okay. So I picked them on the under. So they're supposed to win 90.5. I picked them at 89. So not outrageously under or anything like that. I was like, maybe I should come on and pick them at like 76 and it would be crazy. And Andrew and Michael would freak out. But no, I think that they will have a successful season. I don't think it's going to be for like World Series winning successful, but I think that they'll be good. They definitely have a shot at the wild card. I mean, the NL East is super tough though. So I don't know per se that they're going to be able to clinch the NL East, but I think that I give them 89. So I think that they're going to be pretty good, pretty up to par, up to what people are expecting of them, but just a little bit less.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll be right around 90 as well. I like this prediction because I think 90.5 is probably right there. I'll go slightly over with like 91, 92 as like I feel like this is a 90-win team, but I feel like just for purpose, I want to pick the over here because I don't know. I have a good feeling about this team, especially after they extended Lindor. Like that was just a great note. I'm just right now, I'm just feeling good. Right now, I'm kind of on cloud nine as a Mets fan. So I'll pick the over for them down in Queens. But now I want to move over to the Bronx, crosstown here with the Yankees. 95.5. Kayla, we'll start off with you. That's a big win total, but the Yankees are just they're a really good team, especially in the regular season. But what do you have here?
Yeah, I picked under for that. I thought 95.5 is way too much for them. Like we had said, I don't feel like the Yankees have really done all that much to change up their team this year. I mean, they've made a couple key acquisitions, but on the whole, I would say that they're pretty standard, pretty status quo as what they were last year. So I felt like 95 was way too optimistic. I don't even have them going to the World Series. So I picked them under. I picked them at around, I think that they'll be a 90, 91 win team. I don't think that they're going to do poorly, but not 95.5. I thought that was way too much. So I did go under for them.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to take the over, and there's a few reasons why. First off, I've seen some other numbers actually put the over under like 97, which I think is a little high. So I honestly think they're going to win like 95, 96, 97. So the fact that it's 95.5 and other people will have a little bit higher, I'm going to go with the over on it. Also, you got to think about this. We said this a few times. I think the American League is pretty weak. I don't really think the Yankees did not get better, but neither did their competition necessarily. And I don't really feel threatened by them. And we also have to remember they're playing in a division with the Orioles. So actually the Yankees have had some problems at times with the Orioles, to be fair, but assuming things go as they're supposed to, the Yankees are a far better team. They should be able to feast on that inferior competition. Also the Red Sox, I mean, who knows what's up with them? They are not a team to be feared at all. You can feast on them. The Blue Jays are a very good team. They definitely improved. They were on the precipice of making the playoffs, but again, I'm just not threatened by the other teams. If there were other really good teams in the American League East, you never know what the Rays, there are other teams in the American League, I would say under, but because I just don't think anyone's that good or so great to scare the Yankees away. I'm going to take the over.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to take the over as well. And first of all, I think the Blue Jays did sneak into the playoffs like an 8 seed. I think they were like right there.
I don't remember.
And like, first of all, the Blue Jays basically have like every like 90s all-star player now. Like their sons are on the team, which I think is just really funny between like Biggio and Guerrero, all that stuff. But right now when looking at the Yankees, again, I feel like they'll go over. I think they'll flirt with 100 wins because if the competition's not that good, they'll beat up on some teams. They're a good regular season team. What can I say? I mean, they hit the ton of home runs. They feast on bad pitching. Like they're going to do that. And they have for years. And I think that'll continue, even though they haven't gotten better. I mean, they've still done really good in the regular season over the last few years. Like you can't take that away from them. They've been, a regular season powerhouse for the most part. And, looking at, I think their pitching will probably be good enough, especially with their offense will probably be like top 5 in the league. So that's just kind of where I am. For the Yankees, I think they'll be, 98, 97. I think they'll be, a very good team. But I think when it comes to the playoffs, right now, I just can't say that they're going to get it done. I just can't right now. Maybe they make it to the World Series because the other teams haven't gotten better, but I just don't see it. Like, that's not a way for me to like justify, because I think some team will eventually, if they see they're good enough, like the White Sox, like if they're really good, I can see them, okay, let's get a big starter at the deadline. Like I could definitely see that. And, the way the Yankees are, it seems like they've been like, let's just hold off on a big pitcher at the deadline the last few years. So, again, that's just kind of how I'm feeling with the Yankees over in the regular season playoffs. For me, I'm just a bit shaky. And then finally, Kayla, your Phillies in the NL East as well with our Mets, the rivals, obviously. Right now, they're at 80.5 wins for them. So, over under for the Phillies.
I went over, have to. 80.5, way too low. Come on. I gave them at least 87, 86, 87. I think that they're going to be hovering around that range. They have a really strong bullpen. They've improved it a lot, maintained JT Realmuto. And this is like the first full season under Joe Girardi. And last year they had a season, but it was kind of half. So I'm optimistic about this year. I'm feeling 86 wins. I'm feeling excited about I love them. Maybe I'm just being biased and not actually thinking in my head, but I'm going to give them 86 wins.
So I don't really think the Phillies, sorry to, rain on your parade, Kayla, but I don't really think the Phillies improved that massively. And if we go back, I'm going to throw COVID out the window. If we just go back like 2 years ago, what were the Phillies? Like they were around 81 wins around that time. So, I mean, I think they're pretty much at the number. I think that 80, 81 wins is probably what they're going to get. But because no, this has nothing to do with you, Kayla. I've hated the Phillies for a very long time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to go just because I do not like the Phillies. And I'm just not impressed. And the division is so tough between the Braves, the Mets, The Nationals are still a very competent team. In only 2 years, everyone's forgetting that this is the team that won the World Series 2 years ago. And then the Marlins, who surprised everyone, actually still made the playoffs somehow last year, despite everything that happened. This is by far the toughest division in baseball. And unfortunately, not every team can win, 85 plus games. So I'm going to have to go the under. I probably be right at 80. I don't know. I think they have enough talent to I don't think they're going to be in the 70s, but I could. I'm just going to have to take the under on the Phillies. Sorry, Kayla.
Okay. Yeah, I got to take the under too. Just because
my gosh.
not every team in the NL East can win 85, 90 games. And I think the Mets will. I think the Braves will. And just like the Phillies, I feel like, I don't know, that they have all these just veteran guys that are kind of rehashes, like Andrew McCutchen, like Gene Segura. It kind of sounds like the Mets from 2017. I don't want to sound bad, but it kind of does. Like all these just old players that are just they won the MVP in 2011.
I don't want to
I don't like those types of teams with all the veterans. I don't know.
Just beat the Braves, guys. Where is the excitement out here?
the 1-0 Phillies. Undefeated
so far. I mean, come on, where's the confidence?
I think they'll be around 78 wins. I mean, not bad, but I still think they'll be a little under 500. I just, I feel like not every team, as Mike said, not every team can win, 90 games. So that's just kind of what I think about the Phillies. So moving over here, our final predictions, MVP and Cy Young here. I want to start off with the National League. Mike, we'll start off with you. MVP and Cy Young for the National League.
So as part of my World Series prediction, we're going to go hand in hand here. My NL MVP is going to be Fernando Tatis Jr., the most exciting young player in the game. He's just so fun to watch. He can do everything, offense, defense. I'm going to pick the Padres to go to the World Series and win, he's going to have to be the MVP. So I'm going to tie those two in. And then as far as Cy Young, look, I want it to be Jacob deGrom. I think it will be Jacob deGrom. But as I said before, I'm a giant mush. So by picking him, I know who won't win. So I'm going to go with Yu Darvish, who he came pretty close last year. Also part of my, San Diego.
Sweeping it.
I'm going really high on the San Diego here. So Ron Burgundy would be proud. So I'm going to go with Yu Darvish for the Cy Young. Came pretty close last year. New situation. Hopefully that improves him. So Tatis for NL MVP, Yu Darvish for NL Cy Young. Even though I don't really think it will happen, but I'm just going to pick it.
I'm going to jinx Mike's Mets. I'm going to pick for my NL Cy Young, Jacob deGrom. He's who I'm going to choose. Maybe that'll put a bad spell on them. I don't know. And then my NL MVP is going to be Juan Soto from the Nationals. I mean, at 22, he's just he is one of the best hitters.
I hate Juan Soto.
Why?
Sorry,
he's a backbreaker to the Mets. I understand what you're saying.
He's so cocky, and he does that stupid hunch thing. Get a life! Oh my god, I can never pick. I know everyone's picking. I know. I mean, okay, he's still cocky as hell. I hate him. I hate playing him. But that's a good pick. I know people are picking him, but I just don't like the guy so much. I can't pick him. But go ahead, Kayla. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, that's okay. That was my pick. I'm going with Juan Soto for the MVP, and I'm going with Jacob deGrom for the Cy Young winner.
Yeah, so I'm also going to go deGrom. He's my favorite pitcher. He's been my favorite pitcher for a very long time. Before he was this dominant guy in 2014 when he won the Rookie of the Year, he was my guy. And every year I'll pick him because he's that good. And he's definitely to me the best pitcher in baseball. And then MVP, I'll go with Mookie Betts. I think he's a guy that. I know kind of a slam dunk, but I have the Dodgers, going to the World Series. So that's just kind of where my picks were. And then finally, the AL MVP Cy Young. Kayla, we'll start off with you. Who do you got here?
Okay, AL Cy Young winner. I picked Garrett Cole. I think it's crazy kind of that he hasn't won yet. And so I think that he's definitely somebody who's up for it he's up for it every year, but I really see him actually winning it this year. And then also kind of like a slam dunk AL MVP, I picked Mike Trout. I mean, you can't not pick Mike Trout. So I chose him and Garrett Cole.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Mike Trout for MVP also. I'm look, he's the best player in baseball, so I can't hate on him, but it's kind of it's like with Tom Brady winning all the time, he kind of gets tired of the monotony, but I pick him for MVP. And then Cy Young, look, everyone who knows me knows that I hate the Yankees a lot, and I know Garrett Cole probably will win the Cy Young, but I just cannot bring myself to predict that he will win. So I'm going to go with Shane Bieber back-to-back. He's going to win the AL Cy Young. So Trout and Bieber for me.
Yeah, I've got Bieber and Trout as well. I mean, Garrett Cole, I can't do it. because Garrett Cole, he's a guy that he's very good. Like I'm not gonna say he's not so good. He strikes out a ton of guys, and then his ERA is always like in like 3.2 range. Like it's never like, I mean, it is sometimes, but I feel like he's that type of pitcher, kind of like Scherzer, where he just strikes out a ton of guys, and ERA maybe a little higher than like a DeGrom type. And I don't know. I feel like Bieber is going to back up, after last year's season with another really good one. I mean, he's an outstanding pitcher. So that's, who I got. And Mike Trout, I mean, you can't go up against Mike Trout. I mean, he's a guy that best player in the game. I mean, I'm not betting against him right now until someone else comes up. And he's, to me, definitely, and he's a guy that wins always the MVP. I feel like when in doubt, go with Trout. So I think as I finish off this segment with a rhyme, I think with all that said, it is time to wrap up our edition here of One on One. Special thanks to our guest, 1969 World Series champion, Ron Swoboda. And if you missed any part of our show, you can check out our highlights or the entire program on WFUV Sports YouTube page, and then also WFUVsports.org. The sports director at WFUV is Bobby Chaffardini. Special thanks to our producer, Alex Wolves, for keeping the lights on. As always, Alex, you're the greatest. So for Kayla Wentzel with the headlines and my partner, Mike Leegan, I'm Andrew Gullota, telling everyone to have a great rest of your night. One on One is a production of WFUV Sports.